Did everyone else see the Macklemore track he dropped for Palestine? Turns out the like thrift shop guy has fucking anti-Zionist bars. You saw this, Tim?
Yeah, I thought it was fucking wild that that we got that shit from fucking Mr. Macklemore before DJ Khaled, which is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
blowing my mind. The literal,
Shocking.
the Palestinian guy. But yeah, no, it was wild. I was actually talking to a good friend of mine about it. We were saying like this is awesome, love to see it. Still don't even need to hear thrift shop again.
That's so real.
but,
I
but
saw someone
yeah,
saying like Macklemore under Obama, I have white privilege and that's a problem we need to talk about. Macklemore under Biden, there should be a global intifada.
True,
Right.
true.
He's right, and he should say it.
I thought it went. The bit that really got me was the he said about the music industry. He said, "I want a ceasefire." Fuck a response from Drake. But
Oh
like,
yeah.
I do actually differ from Mr. Ulmore on this one. I think that Drake should respond and see if he can do for the Israeli state what he has done for his own career by doing a response.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's that would be a, another great move by the Israeli social media teams.
Yeah.
To make people really identify with them very strongly.
Hasbro moment. Welcome everyone. It's Red Planet, and we're here today with all the hosts, every single original host. Speaking of which, Sophie, why don't you start off by telling us what's the most base thing you've done over the last 6 months?
Sure thing, yeah. Well, last few months I've been doing pretty shit. My income collapsed and I've been doing what I can to survive. I couldn't get dental treatment and I lost a tooth. If you're a podcast listener, I just showed my missing tooth. I've been really worried about being able to afford food and HRT and paying my bills. If people don't know, listening or viewing, about 5 or 6 months ago, I had some bad kink practice in sadomasochism scenes with some of my partners, and as often happens in kink communities, when there isn't a conflict resolution system in place, I was ostracized by the community. And then people said some horrible stuff about me online, and I probably don't need to tell everyone that the internet is really quick to believe and repeat horrible shit about trans women. So I've been having a really shit time. But my based thing is I've been working on myself. I started seeing a therapist. I've been doing DBT. I've been exercising regularly. I go rock climbing several times a week. I've been like doing a lot more cooking, focusing on different kinds of relationships in my life, which has been really nice. My therapist is fucking fantastic. Shout out to Rachel. She's been recommending me loads of books on like relationships and sex and kink and just like general mental health stuff. If anyone's curious, because I've actually seen a load of people saying they don't have resources for this stuff, like I read a really good book called Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again by Catherine Angel. And Amiya Srinivasan's The Right to Sex is really good. It's an essay collection by an Oxford academic who's just like academic feminist. She's got like incredible takes on everything. But specifically, I've seen people saying that like they don't have any resources for kink stuff. So if people are curious about that, there's a pretty good book called Playing Well with Others. The really good one I read was called The New Topping Book by Dossie Easton and Janet W. Hardy. Although they have a new bottoming book as well, counterpart. And I also found out I have a dissociative disorder. So if people are curious, if other people want to read up about dissociative stuff, I've been reading Dissociation Made Simple, so you can learn how to dissociate. Dissociation Made Simple by Jamie Marich. It's pretty good.
She's been back for 2 minutes and there's already 20 books you need to read.
Okay, I'll stop. Yeah, my base thing has been working on myself, and it's been going well. It's been peaceful and nice, and I am really struggling still though. And like friends have been helping me buy groceries and afford my medication. So I'll say again at the end, but like my links are linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars, and I'd really appreciate any way that anyone can help me out. That was a bit of a bummer. I've got some nice, good based stuff too, actually. So in the last few months, several different friends came to me while I've been on hiatus to ask me for advice on how to organize in their communities, and I gave them my advice. and we'll actually be discussing a little bit along those lines in this episode. I've been watching some of that like come into force and like be organized, and that's been really fucking cool to see. And also in the last couple weeks, shit has been kicking off really hard here with loads of demos for Palestine and more strikes and yeah, loads of shit. So I did some arrestee support for a friend who got arrested at a Palestine demo. If people don't know about arrestee support, like you just chill outside a cop shop and wait for your friend to come out, basically. And then just like make sure that they have what they need and like whatever, inform the like arrestee support line all the details that they need and stuff. It's pretty chill. You meet nice people and you get to like get any reading done that you, well, I mean, if you're me, you do some reading. But yeah, and then I also took part in an immigration raid resistance. So I know that while I've been away, Mule has been winning the most based thing every week. So I thought I'd come back with like 5 things this week. So Mule, how does what you did this week measure up, motherfucker?
Yeah, fair enough. You know what? I gotta stand down. I gotta submit. Honestly, I got a couple of things that I wanted to talk about because I think they're really cool. Obviously, I've not been here for 2 weeks, but I've got a couple of stuff that I wanted to mention. The first being we had an absolutely fantastic win with GMTU. One of our members from Hyde has had some real problems that is actually to do with her landlord that is essentially one of these landlords that lives abroad, completely hands off, just has absolutely nothing to do with the property whatsoever, and expects this letting agent to do all the work for them, basically. And this has resulted in her having all kinds of health problems. She's had like a couple of strokes because of how stressful everything has been. Her son, she's a single mother, and her son has actually had to like stop doing football training because he was literally going to be selected for Stockport County Football Club, which is like, it's not like one of the Premier Leagues, but it's a league. It's in one of the leagues, I guess. I'm not really a football guy, but it's a young person's sport career, and he had to have that basically completely fall apart because he had so many lung problems and doctor's notes saying like you can't be doing any extra exertion. You can't exert yourself too much because it's really going to affect your body if you do that because of all this mold that's in your house because your landlords won't come and repair all of it. So anyway, she's had loads and loads and loads of problems with disrepair. It's affected her, it's affected her son, and the icing on the cake is that they tried to evict her. The funniest thing about it is that the eviction order was not the correct eviction order, so we kept that in the back pocket and didn't say anything about it. And then they did what's called an accelerated possession order, which is when someone hasn't been evicted after a Section 21. And she sent a really good defense to the courts. We went to the court. We worked with Greater Manchester Law Centre. We turned up and the judge was absolutely flabbergasted. He was like, I've never seen a landlord so ill-prepared and a tenant so prepared for an eviction defense. And actually what's happened here is that the person who's filed this court possession order is an estate agent. They're not the landlord, and they don't have any of the landlord's signature on file, so they're not allowed to do this. They're not even allowed to talk, even if they were here, which they weren't. They didn't even show up. And the best thing is that, so our Conrad Kate, who's a member and she works at Great Manchester Law Centre, she was doing like all this preparation with all the like details of the case and everything, and the judge was like, I think he was being a little bit misogynistic because he was a bit kind of like, shut up, I've looked at this actually and I know the right thing to say. But that turned out in our favor because it was something that we hadn't even looked at, which was that they actually fraudulently signed the gas safety certificate. And in the UK, you need to have a gas safety certificate every year, I think, in order to actually have a valid eviction case. And first of all, the copy that they included in their eviction possession order was blue. And everybody knows that the copy that you get as a tenant is yellow. So they just taken a picture of their own copy And then the judge compared the two signatures and was like, yeah, this is obviously fake. So we're dismissing it. Don't worry. And they're going to have to pay all the court costs. It's absolutely fine. So that was super based. Really, really good. She was like absolutely thrilled to bits. Yeah, we're gonna sort of like put the pressure up on the landlord to give her a bit of compo. Other stuff that I have been doing, just the little bits and bobs really, but like I've been knocking around the University of Manchester Palestine camp. Absolutely immaculate vibes. I don't know how to explain it to everyone, but it's just been such a beautiful, beautiful vibe. Lots of different members of the local community in sort of South Manchester, people coming and cooking food, bringing it for people to eat for free. Lots of people doing lots of cool workshops there, like self-defense workshops. I'm going to be leading a eviction resistance workshop tomorrow at 4 p.m. So if you're about and you're a listener and you want to come down to that, that could be quite fun, couldn't it? Watching me, your boy, there actually in real life doing this. But don't be weird about it because that would be upsetting. And obviously people who are listening to the show now, it's not going to be tomorrow at 4 p.m. It's going to be a week ago at 4 p.m. or something. And I also spoke outside the BBC yesterday for the Eurovision protest and did a little bit of a talk about pinkwashing. And I've been told by a couple of people that they thought it was really, really good. So if you want to check that out, go and check it out on my Instagram. It's at DJMU3L. But that's me. That's me. Kira, I want to know what the most base thing you did in the last 2 weeks is.
Well, I've been continuing my normie outreach agenda, pushing my agenda, my pro-Palestine, pro-queer liberation, anti-man agenda down people's throats. So that's going pretty well, actually. And I've also been doing some personal stuff, well, professional as well, where I'm trying to figure out like my next steps for what to do. And it's been kind of making me normally it's been like kind of causing me a lot of stress and paralysis, but I've been trying to work through that. And so I think I'm kind of on the other side of it. I think it's going to have something to do potentially with creating a recipe site where I take my veganism that direction and kind of, I don't know, maybe not so much broadcasting all the time, but maybe making a couple videos here or there to demonstrate something, but mainly to make something a little more static and less like every day I have to resuscitate it, breathe life into it like it is if you're a live streamer. If you're a live streamer, you're very familiar with what I'm talking about. It's like the stress of having every day you have to like do the thing. So yeah, I've been playing around with that a little bit. So it's not exactly explicitly political. Well, it is in a way because it's my veganism, but it's also just more like a lot of just work, self-improvement stuff. And so I'm pretty excited to take that to the next step. And I will be announcing like the website and everything once I have everything snagged. I don't want to like reveal the name or anything because people can be weird about stuff before you have all like, whatever. I will be announcing that shortly in the coming weeks, one of these days. And so stay tuned for that. And I expect everyone, once the website is established, to do a mandatory click in every day, a click and scroll, maybe a comment, maybe accidentally click on one of the pop-up ads that I'm going to have all over the place, just do your part. So yeah, thank you. But what about you, Tim? What have you been up to in the past couple of weeks?
It has been a little while. I've been doing all kinds of stuff, but I think most recently, well, what I was thinking about this morning was over the last couple of weeks in New Zealand and Australia in the tattoo industry, there's been a bunch of there's been a bunch of scandals and kind of like things that have happened in the past that have kind of been brought back up and finally kind of being dealt with. And it's like it's got a lot to do with kind of dudes that have gotten away with a lot of stuff over the years and have left a trail of people behind them who have had their careers ruined by people that kind of weren't very good to them. It's kind of a developing thing. I can't really go into it, but So me and some friends that have all been, tattooing in the industry for a long time and stuff have been working for a while to kind of like, to kind of like sort out a lot of these kind of like recurring things in the industry, but also like over the last couple of weeks really been focusing on helping these people out that have like had their careers destroyed because they were just getting started when something really terrible happened to them. And and that can be a lot, like that can really kind of not just for your like it's hard when the industry is quite a tight knit thing, so people that kind of get pushed outside of that can really find a hard time getting work in shops, or even just like just kind of like the, I guess, like the psychological toll of of that kind of stuff. So yeah, been helping out some of these people that over the years have kind of just had a really rough deal, and getting them back into kind of like being able to like vouch for them and go to shops and be like, hey, look, this person, they need like a couple days a week, this is where they're at, this is what's happened in the past, and we're trying to kind of help them get the career that they deserve that was kind of taken away from them. So yeah, which I think is like the the opposite side of a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of people are really quick to be like, to point at people and be like, oh, this person is a victim and that means that we need to do this to that person or whatever, like that, like to go after their the person that, like, in this case it was like a lot of cases of like grooming and things like that. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool, sweet, but then like you end up with these people that are kind of just like, like everyone moves on, and you get these, in this case, a lot of like young women who are just kind of like left floating. And like, and even if like even a good shop in the past might not take on someone like that, because they'll be like, oh, that's like drama, like that's like whatever. So just trying to help people get back into things. I can't really say too much because it's kind of like an ongoing thing, but yeah, just trying to do, I guess, some kind of like community support for people that haven't been done right by. But yeah, that's what we've been trying to focus on in the last couple of weeks. But we also have a based listener this week. We have an Eve that wrote in to tell us that she attended her first protest, which is awesome. We love to hear. We've been talking about that recently. I think last stream we had a couple of questions about people asking about, going out to a protest, like what to do, how to get involved and stuff. So Eve went out and attended her first protest, and she says it featured a baby shouting "Free, free Palestine" into the microphone. That is a very, very based baby.
That is.
Based baby.
Yeah, I've actually been to a bunch in Auckland. The same. There's been a couple of young Palestinian kids at these events that have got on the mic, which is awesome. I wonder if it was actually maybe one of the
Aw, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so if you do have something based that you've done yourself, we want to hear about it. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that. And yeah, we might shout it out in a similar fashion in a future episode. Awesome. Well, should we get straight into the news then?
Yeah,
Yes.
and I was going to read the based email so that I could then transition back to you, because it's you first. But now
I know, because then it's just like me talking.
I'm just taking the ball off you so I can hold it for a minute and go, wow, what a nice ball, and then say, Tim, do you want to tell us about what's happening on the opposite side of the planet to you, which is the same side of the planet to me? The ball is going back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, we're just throwing this ball across the
Can
ocean.
you tell me about the UK?
Well, I can tell you a few things about the UK. this week we had some senior citizen activists from Just Stop Oil broke the glass protecting the Magna Carta, which is awesome because a lot of these climate protests we're seeing are kind of spearheaded by the youth. We're getting a lot of young people. Well, actually, I would say that it's been a pretty good spread of people of all different ages at these protests and stuff. But I would say that a lot of the more high profile actions tend to be done by younger people. Generally, it's like, I guess climate issues in particular kind of tend to be like, people think of it, oh, it's a issue for the youth because they're the ones that are going to inherit this earth. So it's really interesting to see people in their 80s actually getting in on this, because they're always around at these protests, but to actually be the ones with the tools cracking the glass case is pretty interesting. So yeah, so we had two climate activists smashed a part of the glass case protecting the original text of the Magna Carta, England's historic charter of human rights, in the British Library in London on Friday. The pair, identified as Reverend Dr. Sue Parfitt, who is 82, and Judy Bruce, who is 85, were detained by security staff. The pair were later released on bail and are due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on June the 20th. So in a video posted to social media by the climate group Just Stop Oil, Parfitt holds a chisel to the glass as Bruce hits the instrument with a lump hammer several times. Parfitt then brandished a banner bearing the words, "The government is breaking the law." The document was not damaged, according to a statement from the library. So this is interesting, this statement, "The government is breaking the law," is particularly relevant to the Magna Carta itself, because if you don't know, the Magna Carta is a 13th century English treaty which established that no person, including monarchs, are above the law. So only 4 original copies of the treaty exist, 2 of which are held in the British Library, one at Salisbury Cathedral and the other in Lincoln Castle. So this is like a very, it's like they're saying the government is breaking the law, and here is the treaty that says that not even like the King of England is above the law.
Yeah,
which,
they're literally breaking the glass on it. Like, we need this now.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think it's actually a really, like a lot of people will say about when, like throwing the soup cans on the paintings and stuff, and people go like, how is it relevant or whatever? And it's obviously relevant because a lot of those art galleries and museums do hold financial stakes or like receive money from places like BP and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is a very direct line. Like this is what the protest is about, and this document is directly related to that. So I think for the layman, the person that isn't kind of necessarily too up on like what university or what museum is investing in where, like it's a very easy thing to read and to be like, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Yeah, I thought that's pretty great to see all the people getting in on that. And I think like I saw a friend saying that it was like it's a very old person thing to like invoke the Magna Carta. It's like, it's pretty great.
It's one of these things that like sovereign citizens will be like, they'll be like, Magna Carta, we've got the right to assemble in public, and Magna Carta, I'm allowed to travel and not wear a seatbelt or some shit, whatever they say. I don't have to pay my TV license now, even though I watch BBC because of the Magna Carta,
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so that's what's been happening over in your neighborhood, Sophie. Why don't you tell us what's happening in somebody else's neighborhood in Germany?
Absolutely. Yeah, we went from based babies to based grands. That was great. In Germany, hundreds of German climate protesters have stormed a Tesla factory in attempts to stop its expansion, which would destroy local ecosystems. Climate activists have been camped out in the Grünheide woods near Berlin, protesting the expansion of a Tesla plant, which will devastate local ecosystems. Footage circulating on social media this week, which podcast listeners won't be able to see, but is playing now. And I love because you can see that the Black Bloc protesters are holding hands as they run. And I just think that's really sweet. Showed protesters, showed protesters breaking through police lines to charge the factory located about 30 kilometers from Berlin. According to police, none of the demonstrators actually made it inside, and several arrests were made. During the conflict, several people were injured, and so were 3 police officers. Tesla announced earlier in the week that the site would be closed for the day due to the demonstration, but didn't give all the workers the day off, insisting that many should still work from home in a factory. Incredible. Divorced mine inheritor Elon Musk tweeted after the protests, "Why do the police let left-wing protesters off so easily? There have been some number of protesters camped in the Grünheide woods since February, and in March, the factory did actually have to shut down for a few days, maybe a week, I think, after a suspected arson attack on a power pylon for which the left-wing activist org, the Volcano Group, claimed responsibility." Incredible name. I did a little bit of a look into these guys, and you would think, straightforwardly, climate protesters. They said that doing this attack was a first step towards the path to liberation from patriarchy. So they just kind of whip. Maybe I'll find out more about them. It'll turn out to be terrible, but I just thought that was really fun. The law, of course, is the arbiter of all morality, and nobody at Red Planet finds it very, very funny when apartheid Clyde can't make quite as much money because leftists set fire to his toys. But that's Germany. Before I hand over to Mule, I have a brief anecdote, and just bear with me for a second, because can't say when, can't say where. I encountered an undercover cop recently, and we've talked about undercovers on the show before, and how easy it can be to spot them at protests and actions. And this person who I encountered was acting like a cop at an action and asking a lot of people a lot of fucking questions. And I heard from other people that they had also been spotted at a protest the previous day doing the same shit, and someone had pulled the classic line, "Nice boots, officer," on them. And then they showed up to the place I was at, wearing brand new trainers, which is just hilarious to me, because the two tells that we always go with when we're educating people about this are they'll either have shiny boots or brand new trainers, and this undercover did both. Anyway,
that's amazing.
That was a story that has to do with nothing and no one. Mule, why don't you tell us about anti-raids, immigration raid resistances?
I am pleased to do so. So this story, UK Home Office pushes to remove migrants and enact their 2 fascist plans, the Rwanda plan and the Bibi Stockholm. Local communities come together to tell them to get fucked. The UK government has been widely criticised in recent years for its development of 2 dehumanising plans for processing immigrants. One of these is to rehouse migrants on a barge called the Bibi Stockholm, currently located in Portland Port in South Dorset. The other is to deport migrants to a processing facility in Rwanda, a plan that has had its legality questioned by legal experts. In the last 2 weeks, the Home Office made moves to push forward with these plans, trying to detain and move migrants from several locations in South London, as well as Glasgow and other places in the UK, to the Bibi Stockholm and the Rwanda facility. These attempts were met by targeted, coordinated actions of immigration raid resistance, refusing to let immigration officers put detainees onto transports, or refusing to let the vehicles leave until the detainees were released. In Peckham, where a large coach was stopped by dozens of activists from the local community, 45 people were arrested, although the coach left without any migrants on board, and the other planned stops to detain more people that day were cancelled altogether. An article from The Guardian reports, quote, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, condemned the protesters and said they, quote, will not deter us from doing what is right for the British public, end quote. But the scenes illustrated the challenges the government may face when it comes to carrying out deportations to Rwanda or the Bibi Stockholm, end Guardian quote. So that was a quote within a quote there in case anyone was confused. The Guardian article continues, it quote, it emerged on Thursday that the Home Office was abandoning plans to move asylum seekers in Margate to the Bibi Stockholm in the wake of protests there, end quote. There's been an explosion in the popularity of anti-raid action since 2022, when a Home Office van was run out of Peckham without detainees by a crowd of 200 people singing, "Don't come back to Peckham." Embarrassingly, the Home Office didn't seem to have learned its lesson, but the community of South London is evidently prepared to teach them it as many times as it takes. Kira, sweet Kira, wonderful Kira, my friend, tell us about the non-campus related Palestine protests.
Yeah, so Palestine Action drives a lorry into Leicester Elbit factory. Workers for Free Palestine shut down the Department of Trade. So on May 1st, the internationally recognized Worker Solidarity Day that we all call May Day, hundreds of protesters in a protest organized by Workers for a Free Palestine blockaded and shut down the UK government's Department of Trade in London. Police aggression was well documented on social media, and although several arrests were made, nobody has been charged. The protest was an enormous success, with blocks representing workers, anti-Zionist protesters, and renters all turning out in solidarity against genocide. A simultaneous blockade of BAE Systems arms factories in Scotland, also organized by Workers for Free Palestine, completed the collective May Day "fuck you" to the Zionist death machine. On May 8th, a group of actionists from Palestine Action UK drove a lorry into the Elbit Systems Leicester arms factory as part of their ongoing campaign to shut Elbit down. A second group scaled the factory and set off flares on top of the building. In an Instagram statement, Palestine Action said, quote, "Palestine Action are occupying the Israeli weapons maker, shutting it down for the people of Palestine. Join the ongoing action at UAV Tactical Systems, Unit F, Meridian East, LE191WZ, hashtag shut Elbit down," end quote. So Middle East Monitor reported on it, saying, a week ago, the U.S. paused a shipment of munitions to Israel over the then impending Rafah invasion. Yet the UK government has failed to impose a two-way arms embargo and continues to allow Elbit Systems to operate in this country. This country is a signatory to the Genocide Convention, explained one Palestine Action activist ahead of its latest move against the Elbit factory in Brostone, Leicestershire. Oh my God, these names.
You got it. No,
Okay.
you got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was it.
These laws are not to be discounted just because it's politically expedient to do so. They were set up for a reason, and I cannot accept that the country I was born in and have lived in all my life is deciding to flout those laws, end quote. Another insisted, quote, "If the government isn't going to act, it is my personal, moral, and legal right to take direct action," end quote. So on the same day as the action, the Fire Brigade Union made an official statement advising firefighters to not be involved in any law enforcement activities as a direct show of solidarity with Palestine. So lots of action here, very based. But Sophie, do you want to tell me about the ghouls over at Boeing? What's going on there?
Oh boy, do I. We love Boeing. We love them so much. Boeing under intense scrutiny as their planes continue to fall out of the sky. That's good, isn't it? That's what you want planes to do. And many speculate the company is using hitmen to assassinate whistleblowers, allegedly, in Roblox. Parody, non-actionable. Boeing, please don't send hitmen after us. In recent months, following a series of accidents, it has come to light that the Boeing 737 MAX, which first gained FAA certification in 2017, may be in some way defective. One flight in 2018 crashed into the ocean, killing 189 people, and another in 2019 crashed after takeoff, killing 157 people, though there have been a series of other accidents. In January this year, a Boeing 737 MAX 9 had to make an emergency landing after a door blew out mid-flight, which must be just impossibly terrifying. In March of this year, a whistleblower from the company was set to testify against Boeing about possible problems in the design or manufacture. We don't really know, but just before his appearance was due, John Barnett, former quality manager at the company, was found dead of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. His mother has spoken to press saying, quote, he was looking forward to having his day in court and hoped that it would force Boeing to change its culture. And apparently, Barnett had also spoken to a personal friend and said, if anything happens to me, it is not suicide. This month, a second whistleblower set to testify by the name of Josh Dean fell suddenly ill despite previously apparent robust health and being known for having a healthy lifestyle, and was dead within 2 weeks. While nothing has been confirmed, this has led many to speculate the company is targeting whistleblowers, possibly with a hitman, to attempt to silence criticisms that they've been compromising on safety standards, which is what John Barnett was alleging. So, I mean, if people remember the Concorde, like, I mean, you may or may not be old enough to remember the Concorde, but if you have a conception of the Concorde, people kind of think that the Concorde was super unsafe, and that's why it went out of use. But it was actually a very expensive plane to run, and only had like a couple of accidents. It might have been literally 2, but they were high profile enough that people stopped flying on Concorde because they were nervous about it. And when people aren't buying tickets on planes, like the planes got to fly because some people have bought the tickets, and then the airlines just take a massive fucking L, and it really hurts their bottom line. So like, that's not to say that Boeing's anxiety about their bottom line is understandable, but it's very high stakes for them to have this negative press. And so it's somewhat believable that the company would be quite nervous about people pointing out them compromising on safety standards leading to these kinds of accidents, especially if there are literally hundreds of people dead as a result. There is a class action lawsuit currently in progress. Tim, why don't you we've had the non-campus Palestine protests. There are just so many Palestine protests to talk about. It's crazy. So why don't you tell us a bit about the campus Palestine protests?
I hadn't thought about the Concorde in like 30 years. So I remember when I was a child, that was like, everyone was like, oh my God, the Concorde.
It was mad news. Yeah.
It was. But yeah, there are hundreds of campus protests in support of Palestine in America alone. There's many more across the world. Numerous American universities have already agreed to negotiate with the student representatives of these groups, with some abroad already agreeing to divest from firms that support the Israeli invasion of Gaza and the Palestinian territories, like Trinity University in Dublin, who have agreed to divest after a 5-day campaign from students. Joe Biden has criticized the campus protests, warning that dissent must never lead to disorder and that violent protest is not protected. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest, the US president said on the 2nd of May. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. So that is the fantasy land that Joe Biden lives in, the land of like what they refer to as anarchy on the news, where there's like people flipping over cars and like lots of Joker makeup and all this kind of stuff. But an analysis of 553 US campus demonstrations nationwide between 18th of April and the 3rd of May found that fewer than 20 resulted in any serious interpersonal violence or property damage, according to statistics from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. So, over the same period, ACLED documented at least 70 instances of forceful police intervention against US campus protests, which includes the arrest of demonstrators and the use of physical dispersal tactics, including the deployment of chemical agents, batons, and other kinds of physical force. So what we're seeing here is a far more violent police force than we are seeing, we're seeing more violence from the police than we are from protesters. It's hugely one-sided. It's overwhelmingly literally just encampments. People just setting up in camps and just camping for days on university property. Most groups have made it a thing not to actually not to restrict anyone from actually accessing anything or whatever, but just to take up the space. And instead of being able to go directly to one class, you might have to go all the way around just to like to get in the way of things and make things kind of make it so that people actually have to, I guess, kind of acknowledge the presence and kind of work around them or whatever. So yeah, since the 18th of April, when 108 students were arrested at Columbia University, the administrators of many schools have called in law enforcement to forcibly remove the encampments, resulting in more than 2,600 arrests across more than 50 US campuses, according to an ongoing tally by the Associated Press. So that's wild. Where we see Trinity University in Dublin, 5 days later, they're like, okay, cool, we're going to negotiate. We're going to, wind down. We're going to divest all of our stuff. But you see in America, a lot of these places, it's just like this continued escalation of, police force and I guess like state violence against people that are being very reasonable and nonviolent. And so in retaliation to this, hundreds of faculty staff and staff across Columbia, Barnard, and the Teachers College have signed on to a strike, pledging to only do work that directly serves students until the New York Police Department is removed from campus, faculty members announced in a Friday morning press conference. So this has just come through in just the last couple days. And I've seen notes online of other faculty staff and other universities organizing in the same way, where there has been a heavy police presence. So even though a lot of faculty have supported the student encampments, this is actually the staff and the teachers and the administrators organizing together now to protest the presence of the police, because that was a big narrative I think that was going around, was that oh, these pesky students are stopping everyone from doing their jobs. They're stopping their education from happening, that the hallowed halls of free speech and education, and then, stopping people from being able to do their jobs and all this kind of stuff. So this is kind of this is rebuffing that and saying actually, no, it's the police that are stopping the people from doing their jobs. The police are the ones that are stopping everyone from just, getting back to things. And it's like the police are there to protect the investments, obviously. And then it's like, you've got to it's like the bigger question is, why do so many universities have investments in firms that, are directly financially tied to the invasion of Gaza and, and the Palestinian territories and the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people? Why do universities have a financial stake in that? And obviously that's tied into the kind of neoliberal kind of corporatization of these institutions, right? That's tied into the bigger picture, which we can see as, we always like to say, it's there's the one struggle, there's the bigger picture that we got to look at. And that's part of why that is. And it is becoming increasingly obvious that there are a lot of people embedded in these institutions that are Zionists, and there is kind of a certain amount of capture there. But also it's just neoliberalism. It's just money, right? It's profitable. War business is good business, right?
Yeah, privatizing education institutions, and then they become part of the system of oppression and imperialism.
Yeah. And they're just making investments as any business does, and it just happens that investing in genocide pays dividends.
The invisible hand of the free market guided them towards genocide.
So the game is to make it more financially harmful for them to continue to invest in this way, through people not enrolling in the future. A lot of people saying oh, I was going to go to Columbia, but I'm absolutely not now, or I'm not going to send my kids to Columbia, and all this kind of stuff, so that the financial risk for them is greater than whatever their investments are making every year or whatever, which will probably be a significant thing. But I mean, these protests are huge. So now all these staff are going on strike as well, which is great, and hopefully there'll be a wave of that following. Yeah, so activities covered by the strike include all that directly serve the administration, such as work with the university institutes, centers, and task forces, um, and conversations about the new kind of directions with administrators, participation in committees and listening sessions, commencement activities, and attending and organizing campus events. Faculty and staff participating in the strike wrote in a Friday press release that the NYPD presence on campus has created an unsafe work environment, especially for members of communities who are disproportionately profiled by police, including faculty, staff, and students who are Black, Palestinian, Middle Eastern, Latinx, South Asian, Arab, Muslim, immigrant, trans, and or queer. We have seen that already. We've seen videos of like Black professors being handcuffed and all this kind of stuff. You know, like it's definitely like, yeah, this is an unsafe work environment, right? So this statement says the police assault on our campus relied on a false narrative that our students are dangerous, violent, and hateful. This not only slanders our students and misrepresents the encounter students' explicit rejection of bigotry against anyone, but it distracts the substance of their statements, Jordan Young said at the press conference. We are proud of our students for speaking out and holding our university and our nation to account for funding this relentless attack on the people of Gaza. So there we have it. Yeah, so still, again, a developing situation over there. Good to see that there's already been a long list of universities that are starting to negotiate. A lot of them, they're saying like, oh yeah, we will consider divesting, you know, but like we have these contracts and we have to wait them out and all this kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a, you know, like a tricky thing whether the students continue to push for like immediate divestment or what, but we'll see that as they all kind of, I guess, get to the bargaining table over the next couple of weeks.
Have there been any unis in Aotearoa that have
there
followed
has
suit?
been, so there's an encampment at Auckland Uni that I'm aware of. I don't think that there has been anything. I don't think the university has kind of come back with anything yet. But it has been going for it's been going this whole time. I've had friend of the show, Emmy from People Against Prisons Aotearoa has spoken at the encampment there to give support. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. But continuing on with news related to Palestine, Kira, why don't you tell us what's been happening actually over in Palestine and in the area surrounding? I feel like we spend so much time, yeah, like we've been talking about like how the situation in Palestine affects the world and how the rest of the world is responding to it. But yeah, maybe we can just shift over to focus on the actual place a little bit. What's going on over there?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but my discussion is going to be also about things that are happening also around Palestine. It's kind of hard now to discuss only what's going on inside Palestine without just talking about just horrendous atrocity after horrendous atrocity after horrendous atrocity. So I'm trying to have a conversation a little bit more about like some of the bigger things that are happening, especially because of, I think what our show so far today has kind of demonstrated is the big shift in public opinion in how people feel about Israel and how people feel about Palestine, and also the like normalization of Israel has now been whatever what is that called, like denormalization, the stigmatization maybe of Israel, and that shift is huge. And now the normalization of Palestine and the normalization of standing up against authorities to support Palestine is pretty substantial. So I wanted to kind of like dive into that a little bit, but I just want to say, just like every single week we talk about Palestine here on the show, it's never going to be a fully comprehensive look into what's going on in Palestine. There's just not, Israel's committing nonstop war crimes, just nonstop. They have prior to October 7th, but they are especially now And there's no possible way that we could cover everything that's going on. But I wanted to just touch on some of the things that I thought were important, along with what my co-hosts and I have already touched upon. So since October 7th, at least 35,034 Palestinians have been murdered by Israel, and 78,755 Palestinians have been wounded by Israel on Israel's genocidal attacks on Gaza. So the first big story I wanted to talk about is pretty big. Egypt has now joined South Africa's ICJ genocide case against Israel. So, yeah, this is a big deal. Egypt has arguably been Israel's best ally in the Arab world, helping to uphold the blockade and the siege on Gaza and normalizing Israel's existence. For instance, right now, the Rafah border is being blockaded by Egypt, and Egypt's not allowing Palestinians to escape unless Palestinians pay like an exorbitant fee, and they're like it's all very. It's still being blockaded. Effectively, they're not letting any Palestinians out, with the exception of very few. Not only that, but if a Palestinian fisherman ventures too far out into the Mediterranean Sea, off the coast of Gaza, the Egyptian Navy will snipe that Palestinian dead, or the Israeli Navy, one of the two. So Egypt and Israel have been working in cahoots effectively to maintain the siege and blockade on Gaza. And many people feel that the way that Egypt has bent the knee to Israel in the humiliating and disgraceful ways it has been doing, people generally think that they do this in order to not anger Israel further and to gain the benefits of allyship with a Western-backed fascism. So now that Egypt has just announced that it's actually joining South Africa's ICJ genocide case against Israel, it's kind of thrown that relationship pretty formally and publicly on its head. Alon Leal, who is the former director of Israel's foreign ministry, told Al Jazeera that the move is an, quote, unbelievable diplomatic blow to Israel. Egypt is the cornerstone of our standing in the Middle East. End quote. He also said that the connections that Israel has in the Middle East and North Africa today, including with Jordan, the UAE, and Morocco, is all, quote, a result of what Egypt did 40 years ago, end quote. And here he's referring to Egypt and Israel signing a peace treaty 40 years ago in 1979, which was the first time an Arab country recognized Israel as a legitimate state. So Egypt has had a long, as long as you can say long, and you've seen how Israel's been on the map for like 3 seconds. But, considering the time that Israel's existed, Egypt has had a long relationship with Israel, demonstrating its throwing Arab people under the bus in order to side with Israel for whatever benefits that they perceive, worth it. So Israel or Egypt now siding with South Africa in such a profound public and like devastating kind of way in terms of how they're taking a stand. This is huge. I personally am not going to just now look at Egypt as this like friend of Palestine, but this is certainly a step in the right direction. Also, the UN General Assembly just backed the Palestinian bid for membership. So there was a General Assembly, UN General Assembly voted on not giving Palestine full UN membership, but recognizing Palestine as qualified to join and extending them, therefore, privileges for doing so. So in favor, 143 countries voted in favor. Against, 9 countries voted against, including the United States, and 25 countries abstained, the UK government being one of those major entities that abstained from the vote. Notably, France, Spain, and Portugal joined the global south, their imperial periphery, in voting for the revolution. Now, in response to this, Israel's UN ambassador took out a mini shredder to shred pages of a pocket-sized UN charter. This is the way that Israel responds to a legitimate democratic expression of Palestine having even the chance to be considered a member.
It's really
It should be-
normal, really normal stuff.
real normal time.
I know it's one of the most common things you see with anyone's criticizing anyone's protests is to just say like, oh, they're just throwing a tantrum, but like this is baby hours. Like this is
It is a
pathetic.
tantrum, actually.
Real baby hours.
It's
real.
like a skit, right? It's like, yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. Like, I always think like how so much of it is just like a Sacha Baron Cohen kind of bit, you know? Like, and it's like just watching it, anyone else would be embarrassed, right? You know, like if me and Sophie we're at the fucking UN or whatever, and I start explaining to her I'm gonna bring out a mini shredder, and then she's like, what would you say to me? What
Pretty
would
quickly,
you say?
I wouldn't say anything to you. I'd just be like, I don't know him. People would be like, didn't you come together? And I'd be like, no, I don't know. That guy. No, I came with a different guy. So I'd be like, oh, Tom, hey, my buddy, I gotta go over there. Like,
Yeah, like, and just like they're doing so many of these things, you know, like with the yellow stars and all that kind of stuff, where it's just like, man, like, I don't know, like, I don't see how they.
oh, what they had the yellow star and the bloodstained trousers. Did you see this thing?
I mean,
Yeah,
they're just like
Jesus.
huffing their own farts, and they're just like, yeah, this will be really poignant. Like, I don't know. Anyway, Kira.
Yeah. So just to follow up with the little tantrum, it should be also noted that when Israel's UN ambassador did take out the mini shredder to shred pages of a pocket-sized UN charter, just a reminder that Israel is constantly violating UN resolutions. So this doesn't really look too good in, helping to detract from that when they're just blatantly just making a show of how little they respect the UN Charter and the UN resolutions. Also, the Israeli government expressed appreciation towards the very small minority of UN member states that voted against giving more privileges to Palestine. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz named a number of right-wing leaders, including Hungary's Viktor Orban, Argentina's Javier Milei, and Prime Minister of the Czech Republic Petra Fiala for, quote, standing on the right side of history and voting against the UN General Assembly resolution that was backed by 143 countries. So, this next story is not to hand it to the Biden administration or the U.S. government, but it's something I wanted to point out. And the reason I wanted to point this out is because I think it's an expression of not any sort of moral flip whatsoever in the U.S. government or the Biden administration, but I do think it's a response. It's a liberal, limp dick, like kind of like pathetic attempt to try to placate people like you and me, the people that have been very vocally against the Biden administration and very vocally against, their continued support of Israel's bombardment of Gaza. So if you recall, Israel keeps talking about how they're totally going to go and invade Rafah, which is the southernmost portion of Israel, where about 1.4 million Palestinians are sheltering there. Note that Rafah can only handle like a few 100,000 people, and even then it's dense. So we're talking like an incredibly densely populated area of Palestine that Israel has insisted Palestinians move to so they can, quote unquote, be safe from Israel's attacks. Now, we all know that's bullshit. They're not actually safe, but they're even less safe now that Israel is threatening to actually invade and bombard Rafah. So this plan is so horrific that even the Zionist U.S. government is feigning, I would say, feigning concern, expressing concern. I think it's feigning concern. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is a major Zionist, has defended the decision to pause the delivery of Israel of 3,500 bombs over concerns that they could be used in the southern city of Rafah, saying Israel lacked a, quote, credible plan to protect the 1.4 million civilians sheltering there. So speaking to ABC News, Blinken said that Biden remains determined to help Israel defend itself, and that the shipment of 2,000 pounds and 500-pound bombs was the only U.S. weapons package being withheld. Now, I wanted to point this out because I've heard from some people in my ventures into Normie land. I've heard people say that the U.S. government has stopped shipping weapons to Israel. They're not stopping shipping weapons to Israel. This is why I feel like this is a virtue signal in order to placate people like you and me, because they're not actually like stopping anything, and they're still fully in favor of this like defend themselves bullshit line, which we all know is it's just bullshit. But they are, I think, trying to pretend they have a spine, to pretend they have some sort of like morality whatsoever. What are you going to say, Mule?
The way that the UK kind of deals with this, you were talking about the UK government just then, weren't you? The way that the UK kind of wants to, because, obviously our Tory government is very like focused on numbers and money and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the way that they look at it is that like, oh, well, in the grand scheme of things, the UK only really gives like 3% of Israel's weapons, right, to it. They only like really like give like a tiny amount. So no one's going to notice, really. I think that's kind of like what they're running with. And also the fact that like Palestine Action has been shutting down so many weapons factories successfully, along with Workers for Palestine. They might actually be like trying to recuperate like a little bit of those actions to say like, oh yeah, we're not selling weapons anymore, like not as many as we used to, because we can't do it because these activists have been fucking over. So I don't know if that's something to do with it. Like that's why they're saying that. They could also just be like not thinking about any of that stuff at all and outright lying. It's all speculation at this point. But just input from the British guy, I guess, about the government.
So apparently, the Biden administration says that if Israel launches a full-scale attack on Rafah, the impending shipment of weapons could be withheld potentially. All these like very ham-handed, like very like kind of lukewarm gestures, and I swear I really am convinced this is all just to save face. It's just because Biden's popularity is plummeting, and he had shit popularity to begin with. He was only elected because Trump bungled COVID and that badly, which is pretty much the general opinion of like Biden. And also like not only that, but because like the Democratic Party worked so hard to make Biden the candidate, if you recall the 2020 election, but we don't have to get into that. Basically, Biden's not a popular guy, and his continued support of the genocide of Palestinians has made him even more deeply unpopular. Before, and people just didn't like him or felt nothing maybe for him, and now people like hate this guy and are protesting explicitly against him and are doing the undecided movement, which is like putting on the ballot undecided, and now like a very substantial proportion of the American voter is actually like getting on board with this, showing explicit protest for Biden. So
who else showed support for the undecided movement? Macklemore. So but on the other hand, if Trump gets back in, Israel will do 2 genocides. So
got it. Thank you, Sophie. So Biden has made it clear to Israel that if it launches this major military operation to Rafah, there are certain systems that we're not going to be supporting and supplying for that operation. Quote. I could go on this, but I personally think it's bullshit, but I think what they're expressing is bullshit, but I wanted to point this out to spell any sort of rumors that I've been hearing that the U.S. is withholding weapons, like completely. They're not. And two, to just recalibrate everyone if you needed it, the Biden administration isn't on our team. They're just trying their best to like weaken your resolve against them. All right. I just want to remind you all, don't forget about the West Bank. The West Bank is not Gaza. It's another quote unquote territory of Palestine, but it's being thoroughly just bombarded in different ways by Israel. Maybe not explicitly bombed, but being raided, Palestinians being abducted, streets and buildings being razed and demolished. Speaking of, 226 buildings in the West Bank were destroyed or damaged by the Israeli army just in April. And the West Bank is not that big. The Palestinian Authority's Ministry of Public Works and Housing says that almost half of the structures are destroyed or damaged during Israeli raids are located in the Nablus governance, mainly in the villages of Kustra and Duma. The rest are in a refugee camp, in the Nur Shams refugee camp in Tulkarem and the Ramallah area. The ministry also said that 54,000 square meters of infrastructure has also been destroyed by Israeli forces during raids at Tulkarem and Jenin in April. Just to remind you all, I always try to touch on the West Bank in some way, shape, or form. Just remember, it's not like this all started on October 7th, and it's not only happening in Gaza. All Palestinians and all Palestinian, like any area that is considered a Palestinian quote unquote territory, is being invaded and somehow fucked over by Israel. And the last story I want to touch on is how the only democracy in the Middle East, Israel, is now arresting journalists or detaining journalists within their borders on suspicion of working for Al Jazeera. So last week, Israel's cabinet unanimously voted to shut down Al Jazeera, immediately ordering the closure of its offices and a ban on the company's broadcasts. The shutdown comes a month after Israel's parliament passed a law in April that allowed Israel to temporarily shut down foreign media outlets, including Al Jazeera, if it deems them a threat to security. Does this sound familiar? This language sound familiar to anyone? This means the Al Jazeera website and the television station are now banned in Israel. And within Israel, cable providers, in lieu of the channel, will show a message that says the network is now prohibited from the air. So now, on top of that extremely blatant textbook form of fascism, Israel's now applying this blatant fascism to individuals. Journalists from the London-based news outlet Al Arabi Al Jadid were detained last night by Israeli authorities during protests calling for a deal to release captives. The Israeli news outlet said the journalists were being held on suspicion that they may be working for Al Jazeera. So, not great. This was not great. That's what I'm trying to say.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, but I just wanted to close out all of that with a brief reminder. If y'all enjoyed the show so far, or even if you hate the show, if you're so mad about it, we wanted to remind you that Red Planet is made possible by the direct support of our viewers. We're a 100% viewer funded driven show. So please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/red_planet to support us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mule.
It's going great.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Kira.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you, Sophie.
Aw.
Thank you, Mule.
The topic today is assemblies. If people don't know about assemblies, they're pretty good.
It's not when you sit in school and sing hymns
No, that's
for
not
the British.
That's
That's
the
not what we're
British joke.
talking about. They are called assemblies, those
Yeah.
things, but that's
Yeah.
not what we're talking about
Yeah.
here.
And it's not
People's
when
Assembly of the primary school. I don't know where I was
It's-
going with that.
it's not when a bunch of superheroes get together, and it's not when a bunch of senators get together, but that's actually the closest one, because governments sometimes use language of assemblies, because they're doing a grim, almost necromancy-like gross imitation of real democracy, puppeteering around democracy's corpse. And so when politicians claim to be doing an assembly, it's based on the idea that representatives who represent the people are there discussing what matters to the people, and we know this is bullshit. But real assemblies are pretty cool. Does anyone have their own shot at defining an assembly directly? Oh, Mule does right away.
Me.
Yeah,
Me,
go
me,
on,
me, me,
go on,
me.
go on.
Okay. Assembly it's a very good word that people have chosen to describe it, because it is literally just an assembling of people. It's people coming together, assembling. And essentially the idea is that things are spoken about as a community, things are spoken about as a group, concerns are raised, concerns are debated, and there are representatives there from the community that have either been elected democratically in order to, represent the people in general, and lead them into a way in order to resolve the concerns that are raised at the assembly, essentially. And it's up to the people in the assembly, not just the leaders and the representatives, but it's up to everybody there to problem solve and fact find and build structures in order to solve these problems that people are bringing to the assembly, essentially.
Yeah. I think this is going to be one of these classic Red Planet discussion episodes where the thing we're talking about is quite broad, and could actually take a lot of different forms. But hopefully, we're going to look at some different examples. And while we might not have like the nitty gritty of all the examples, like talking about those examples should be able to help people key into like the broad range of what they could be. A prepared example I have that I know Tim's going to pop off for is the Soviet Union. When people talk about like the betrayal of the revolution and like the big disappointment of the USSR was that like a lot of the mass of people, the majority of people by far, were trying to aim for basically like an assembly model like across the whole USSR. Like they wanted a sort of full proportional representative democracy of people like feeding back what their problems were and having a sort of flexible system to like combat their issues. And like when people talk about it being co-opted or being betrayed or any of these sorts of ideas, like they're talking about like the loss of that vision, right?
Yeah, and we've talked about it a couple times as well, like places that are still places like Cuba and North Korea that are still running on these kind of like assembly models that are like a lot of people will say they're undemocratic because of this lack of like party pluralism. So instead of having like a red team and a blue team and a green team or whatever, it's you don't have parties, you just have the whole big people's assembly, the supreme assembly, or whatever whatever the state wants to call it. And so it's like people are voting on voting more frequently. Generally they're voting on a smaller scale on and local assemblies that are then representatives of those go on and speak at other things. And it's kind of like like a lot of people say this is a better example of direct democracy, where people, so instead of like in New Zealand here, I vote for a local MP that goes to parliament, and they represent like what I hope that they represent my wishes there, whatever. But in a lot of like in places like Cuba and North Korea, it might be like, okay, so there's a local assembly, like a local little council thing, and we all go there. Like they've got a meeting on, and we can all go there and we can raise our issues, and we can be like, hey, look, this is what we need in our local area or whatever, like that, and we get to vote on it, as the people that locally live in this like little town or whatever.
Yeah.
And then obviously that goes on into bigger groups and stuff like that. So instead of voting for people to represent us, there's some of these models rely on us directly representing ourselves, which I think is a really interesting way of doing things. And then when you start looking at models like this, you start going like, oh, okay, well, obviously they don't need multiple parties for this, right? So yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting model.
And the interesting thing about that kind of an assembly where your representative is actually in person with you, it means that they can't hide behind the famed email response, can they? They can't hide behind just email my desk and I'll get to it. I will definitely take your concerns about Palestine and trans rights seriously. Signed, Lucy Powell, my MP. She definitely takes all that stuff really seriously over the years. Gets back to me immediately with not the worst responses I've ever seen in my entire life. Fuck Lucy Powell.
Yeah, it's the same down here. Like, we're always told, like, there's like legislation that says they have to reply to you, they have to do all this kind of stuff. Like, of all the times I've ever got in touch with a local representative, I barely ever get a reply. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the party system is like something that like when we are introduced into a system and it has all these features, it gets naturalized really quickly. And when we are introduced into like, this is democracy and how democracy works, and then like when it's explained to you, like there are parties, and then the parties say like, these are the policies we're going to do. It seems like common sense enough. But actually, if you look at a history of it and you see parties being introduced into what was like previously a system that like not like necessarily didn't have parties, but like certainly worked differently, like even British Parliament, right, is the example I'm going to point at. George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, wrote a book called Everybody's Political What's What, and he has a little scene he's written in it where he's being kind of mischievous with it. It's a funny little scene, but like the way he constructed it is quite fun. And it's like the king coming to this like political Machiavellian dude and asking how he can like control parliament because it's getting out of hand. And the dude is like, well, you got people who are in these political alliances already. If you literally just make it so that instead of the prime minister selecting everyone who's the best guy for the job out of the like elected MPs, instead it has to be MPs who are part of his party that has won, then they'll always just be fighting for which party is in control forever and ever and ever. And it's like, as soon as you like hear that account of history, like it's not like British Parliament was like serving the people and was so democratic before this point, right? But it's like you can see that immediate turn away from democracy, and you can see a straight line from there to like all the repeated movements there have been in the UK to try to get different, like, the alternative vote, proportional representation, coalitions in all these different forms, trying to basically break the deadlock of the, I think that's the wrong word, but like, like just break out of the two-party system, because the two-party system just like jams up any kind of democratic process completely. Yeah, and I think that like, yeah, as soon as you start to like grok that, it's actually like, wow, like what we call democracy has this completely useless element to it of parties, and like, why the fuck do we even have that? And it's not, it's not something we've chosen to have. But on assemblies, right, I think what we want to talk about today, like, we're not necessarily talking about like on the state level, or if you're not in a big fan of the state, then not on the like large cultural region level, but like a lot of assemblies that happen in organizing are just a bunch of people have come together in like quite a large number, and they want to talk about something. And so another example I wanted to point to in like histories of assemblies happening would be the Occupy movement. And I think that's one that keys in a lot of people to like how well assemblies have worked. Very similar stuff happened with the Chaz. Like when a bunch of people come together and like they've mobilized for some kind of big moment, right? Like there's something's going down that gets like a lot of people invested, but they haven't necessarily all come down with a completely like ideologically cohesive moment behind them. It's like you have, I don't know, you have those like hundreds of workers doing the like Workers for a Free Palestine action on May Day, right? That's a lot of people, but they're organized through orgs, and they're literally only there because someone, at the most tenuous, like the most disinvolved, is someone who someone who is in the org or is in the group chat, says like, hey, I trust you, you come along and help hold the banner today, right? Add to the numbers. And that's like the most disinvolved they could be. Whereas like when you're talking about Occupy, you're talking about the Chaz, you're talking about stuff like the Zad that we're making the documentary about, like this is stuff where like there's a big political moment going on, loads of people pile down somewhere, and it's like they've shown up because they like maybe even just saw it on the news. There's no ideological cohesion whatsoever. And then like once it gets to the moment where you want to know like what are we doing and what do we want to actually get done, you have to start like holding some kind of structure to let people have their voice, and that's where the assembly comes in. Yeah, but I think there are more examples I'll definitely get around to, but I think something I really want to focus on is like the idea, basically, like I think that assemblies happen frequently in the way I've described, organically springing out of a political moment of mobilization, and lots of people are together and need to have like need to like hash it out. But I think we need to start thinking about assemblies as a tool and a thing that we do deliberately, like deliberately forming a space to have this kind of democratic discussion, because I think that like not having it is really holding us back. I think that yeah, I mean I have a lot of things I want to say about that, but I feel like Mule, you were saying that recently like GMTU is talking about like starting an assembly model.
Yes, well, it's very exciting, and I'm very excited about it. So just to give you a kind of a bit of background on Greater Manchester Tenants Union, that's the organisation I've been organising with for the last couple of years. It's a tenants union of tenants. You know, the truths that we hold to be self-evident are landlords are bad. Even social landlords, they're very bad. They're privatized, and they need to be held to account, or at the very least stopped. Just stop them. And it's a very, very good organization and has a lot of incredible branch-based single campaigns. Now, with those branch-based single campaigns, like very focused campaigns that have been born out of a branch being established in a neighborhood and identifying a problem in that neighborhood, these campaigns have been super good, super focused, and have actually gotten a lot of really good results. So for example, we have 3 main anti-gentrification campaigns. We have Block the Block in Hume from the Hume branch. We have Save the Seven Sisters in Rochdale from the Rochdale branch, and we also have Ardwick Against the Monster in Ardwick. And we've done a lot of different bits of organizing to get, you know, local people involved and try and have them essentially back the campaign just through letting them make their own mind up about it, basically. And it's been done in lots of different various ways in different branches. Like, for example, in Moss Side, they have been doing Know Your Rights sessions, and that's been really, really good. Because they've been running it as in a kind of assembly fashion, but I'll get more into that later on. They just kind of like build it as a Know Your Rights session, and then they had an assembly structure to it where everybody would kind of talk about their own issues, kind of thing. Essentially, that's what it is. But that is completely different to how it was done in Hume, where the Block the Block campaign was identified. And that's kind of like a really interesting thing, because the kind of support for Block the Block has been consistently very, very good and very, very positive, but it's kind of like waned a little bit. And we think that one of the main reasons for that, well, I personally think one of the main reasons for that is because we've not been very good at identifying capacity, and we think that assemblies are actually gonna change the entire way that we do things. And that's because you get a lot of very, very committed activists sometimes who are very, very mobilized by a particular campaign, and they can get burnt out in trying to do so much for that particular campaign because the movement isn't exactly growing. You know, more and more people are hearing about it, but it's people from outside of the area, and it's not really quite working in the way that, you know, we might want it to work. But delegation of people from Greater Manchester Tenants Union went to Barcelona about a month ago now to an international meetup of tenants unions, and every single one of them came back to GMTU telling us like, oh my god, they're doing amazing things in Spain, they're doing amazing things in Toronto, they're doing incredible things in the USA, oh my god, we got all these ideas, blah, blah, blah. And one of the main ones was Assemblies, and the Barca, I think it might have been the Catalan Tenants Union, and they have like assemblies every single week. and they're in a school, and there are at least like 30 to 40 people turning up, you know, families from the local area, people of all ages, old, young. And that is exactly what we want to replicate in GMTU, because that's the kind of, you know, when you talk about housing, it's so broad. It's not a young person's issue. It's not an old person's issue. It's not a white issue. It's not a black issue. It's everybody. Everybody needs a fucking house. And of course, like, you know, there are nuances to all of it. But in terms of like, you know, trying to bring people together and power up, build that tenant power and build that capacity and get new activists and mobilize them. Assemblies are really, really good at that. And I'll kind of give you an idea of like what we're planning to do, because we had a planning meeting literally yesterday. And the funny thing about it is that it was kind of run a little bit like an assembly. So we got loads of people to come in and contribute from all over the union. So we had one of our comrades from Moss Side talking to us about the Know Your Rights sessions. We had one of our comrades from Middleton talking to us about the way that they have been running assemblies in Middleton, and like, you know, learning kind of how they've you know, progressed and mistakes that they've made, so that we could try and avoid those and you know, do things better, or do things you know, avoid these mistakes, like I said. And we just had people from all over the union, and it was very funny because like most people were saying exactly the kind of thing that me and Connor, who is my sort of like one of the closest comrades in the union for me, because he does the same role as me. He's another elected member solidarity officer on the committee. So in terms of what we wanted, what our vision was, and I think I'm just going to run through these points and we can discuss them. If anyone wants to discuss them, just stop me. But we think that we have like a basic idea of how they're going to run now. And one of the most important things is beginning every single assembly with vision building and sharing, positive and honest education, kind of over toned down politeness, hoping for engagement. So what do I mean by that? We don't want people to come to us and expect us to provide a service, right? We don't want people to come to us and be like, oh, can you deal with my housing issue? There you go. And then they run off and they never speak to us again, because we're not about that. So what I mean by vision building is whoever's running the assembly, it'll probably be me and Connor in the next couple of months when we're piloting this. Either one of us is going to sit there and be like, yo, we're a radical tenants union. We're about activism. We're about campaigns. We're not about like, you know, we're gonna do this thing for you. We're gonna take your case away. We're gonna win it for you. Obviously, it depends. There might be some people who really, really, really need the help of the Housing Justice Network and Greater Manchester Law Centre, and so we'll, you know, refer them to them. Absolutely. But generally speaking, if people are talking about things like disrepair, and we identify that they've got a private landlord who's the same private landlord as someone else who came, then ideally, we want them to understand that that is a campaign waiting to happen, and you need to do door knocking and research and find out, you know, what is this landlord's property portfolio? Do you know all of his, properties? And can you go to those properties and recruit people and get them to take part in a collective action and a collective dispute, essentially? So, any questions about that?
I was going to say, like, I think there's an analogy I would draw. And it is just an analogy really, but like you were saying about like having the planning meeting and the planning meeting actually being like a bit like an assembly, and that kind of set off in my brain like the one of the changes that we had when Conrad came onto the show was that we started having our like planning meetings for the show like after every episode. Like people who didn't know this, like I don't think we've mentioned it, but like, you know, after we're done having the show, like we all chat about how it went and like how things are going in general, what we think we could do, like where we're going, like I don't know, like merch ideas, whatever kind of stuff that needs to get discussed, right? Like, and like a planning meeting and an assembly are not necessarily the same thing. And like a planning meeting that's inside of, say, like to do the other side of the analogy, like a particular campaign for the tenants union is going to be a planning meeting that's about that campaign. And so there are certain kinds of ideas that are not going to be relevant. Like similarly, if we were having our planning meeting for Red Planet and Mule was like, give me advice for this guy I met on Grindr, we'd be like, babe, another time. This is the Red Planet planning meeting, right? But like It's
I do always need advice about Men on Grindr. To
that's
be
why
fair,
I
like
picked
this.
that example.
Yeah.
It's the main thing that he texted me at 3 a.m. I need help with this guy. So fuck. But like, you know, you in the way you're talking about like bringing in assemblies as a regular thing as well, I think that's another really powerful thing here. Like the examples I talked about so far are very much things where people have come together and then they've had assemblies and they've discussed stuff. And again, we'll come back around to this idea in a minute, but like they've had assemblies, they've discussed stuff, and then they've gone away to do the stuff, and the assemblies stop happening. And like,
Yes.
so again, with my analogy, like, you know, the four of us when we started the show, like got together and then we're like, how do we want to run this, and then just started doing it, right? And then like only if like one of us like was like, oh shit, we really need to have another planning call to talk about this stuff, and it would happen like once every couple of months or something. And then Conrad came in and, you know, doing his job as producer was just like, no, we're having a planning call after every single fucking episode. Like, of course we are, right? And I think that's like, you know, the benefits that have come out of that have been enormous for the show. And it's like it's the same thing with an org, right?
Yes, that's actually a really, really good point, because one of the main concerns that some of our staff members had, for example, was about the frequency, because we were thinking to just pilot this and do it once a month, this kind of like centralized member solidarity team assembly. And then we were thinking, okay, well, we know that Moss Side does a kind of assembly, and we know that Middleton does a kind of assembly. But for those that don't know, these are literally diametrically, like, not diametrically, what would you call it, like geographically opposed areas in Manchester. Like Middleton is all the way in North Manchester, Moss Side is in South Manchester, a little bit more inner city. So it's kind of like, okay, if someone goes to the Moss Side assembly and they don't quite get, like, you know, the right advice, and they want to go to another assembly to try and, like, you know, talk about their campaign and what they want to do and get advice and stuff, well, then there's not going to be another assembly for like a month. And if they want to go to another assembly, they might have to go to Middleton. No one in Middleton is going to care about what's going on in Moss Side. They are going to care, but they got their own stuff, what's going on. So that was the main thing that we were talking about. And I think the way that we wanted to do it was to make sure that we had an assembly at least once a week. So at the moment, we're planning on doing an online assembly specifically for people who cannot make it to public assemblies in person. So, you know, disabled comrades, or people who just don't have the time, people who are working shift work that's not, you know, the time doesn't actually like match up with when the assemblies are happening. So we're going to have one of those meetings, and then hopefully we're going to time it so that meeting happens, and then the Moss Side assembly happens, and then the Middleton assembly happens. And in between, we have an assembly either 1 month in an inner city part of North Manchester and the next month in an inner city part of South Manchester. But for the time being, we're going to keep it in the city centre, just because we just think it'd be easier for everyone. So yeah, the frequency is a really important thing, because people are going to feel like you aren't quite concerned with their stuff. And of course, if someone comes to us and says, yo, I've got an eviction notice, and we do all the research about it, and we find out, oh shit, this is actually like, it's legit, this is a real eviction notice, we need to organize an eviction resistance. That's of course like a completely different you know, scenario where we have to mobilize pretty quickly. And I don't think we're too concerned about that, because we've had, you know, we're really good at mobilizing for eviction resistances. A lot of the time when it comes to evictions, we just advise people like, yeah, check it against the gov.uk website, and then they find out that the wording's all wrong. So, you know, they can either go to court themselves and argue like, hello, Your Honor, actually, this is incorrect. Would you like to have a look at that? And then they'll go, oh, yeah, that's true. So this is dismissed. Or they can have support from the law centre. It depends. So anyway, digressing a little bit there. But yeah, frequency is so important, and geography as well. And ideally what we really want, because an assembly every week is great, right? But an assembly every week in every part of Manchester is real tenant power. And that's the vision, right? That's what we want. So ideally what we're hoping to do is build up branches who aren't doing the assembly model once we've trialed it, once we've piloted it, and reach out to them and be like, time to crack on with your assemblies, actually. You know what I mean? And then hopefully we can get to a point where everyone in Manchester has like a place to go to discuss their issues with their landlords. So yeah. Anyone got anything to add about that?
I really love that thing you said. That's real tenant power, right? Because like that's the idea again, that we're sold with democracy, but democracy has become this horribly like insipid word for us, like because of what politics is for most people, because of electoral politics. Democracy feels like this complete like milquetoast, tedious, bland thing, and it's like no, like actual democracy of this kind, like I mean, I think this is something I really want to try and hammer home in this episode, is like, we're talking about assemblies, we're talking about people having their voice heard, and it's like everything you can say to sell the idea of democracy immediately switches people's brains off, because they think about electoral democracy, they think about electoral politics, and they're like, oh, having my voice heard, yeah, by my MP. Like, it's literally the thing you were saying earlier, like, oh yeah, well, I'll email Lucy Powell and then she'll like just fob me off, right? Like, it's just because we've had such a fucking averse experience of democracy, right, that we don't get how powerful it is. But then you said this, like, that's real tenant power. And it's like, yeah, if there are places all over Manchester where people can go have their voices heard as tenants, then they can be plugged into those networks, and then they can solve their problems. And then that is literally real tenant power. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is making sure that people really understand, because this was another thing. So I'm actually I've got a bunch of bullet points here, so I'm gonna like flip around depending on what any of my co-hosts say about, like, you know, what I'm talking about. But on that, on getting people to engage with politics, this is something that we discussed in the planning meeting, and it was very heated debate, actually. What do we call this? Because not only in the UK do we have this unique situation where you get people who say, I don't do politics, but actually everything is politics. You know, what you're talking about is electoral politics. So getting people to engage in actual democracy within an organization, that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is making sure that it doesn't sound too much like communism, because we obviously have neoliberal McCarthyism over here as well. So we actually decided to not call them assemblies. We decided to call them housing rights sessions, because what the British people love, a session. You know, and of course we're not going to be marketing this as like everybody getting boozed up at the pub. That was actually something that we very much you know, wanted to vote against, because of course we want to appeal to Muslim tenants, we want to appeal to working families. You know, it's not just going to be like a Friday meet up at the pub. We're gonna try and do it at like you know, a Saturday, so that people have the opportunity to bring their kids if they want, and yeah, childcare is going to be a bit of organizing. But anyway, yeah, so naming conventions is super important, and I think, like, on top of that, the engagement will come, essentially, because once people realize that we're not doing this fannying about going to our politicians, we're not trying to go and do loads of complaints to the housing ombudsman. Everybody knows it, whether it's in the back of their head or whether they've been banging their head against the brick wall of bureaucracy for years and years and years. Everybody knows that this bureaucracy monster, whether it's your social housing tenant, whether it's the regulatory systems for private tenancies, it's all nonsense. Everybody knows it's all nonsense, and it doesn't get anyone anywhere, essentially. So in basically having that initial vision building conversation, like, we are a tenants union, we do direct action, we do campaigns, we do eviction resistances. We're not here to, like, you know, write letters to the MP. We're not here to, like, ask Rishi Sunak, please Rishi, just give us a bit more housing rights, please. You know, it's not that. So then people will understand, oh, actually something's happening here. So that's the idea. That's the idea. Other things that we wanted to like involve with the way that we run it, I think that a really important thing would be identifying new members who are turning up to these things immediately. So kind of having like 15-20 minutes at the start to mingle, let all the members chat to each other for a little bit, because, it's a social thing too. And then the activists who are running it, so it'd be like me or some other members of the MSO team, we can run around and basically go, hi, you're new, welcome in, how's it going? So, I'm Mule, and you've come and you're new. Obviously, I think I spoke to you on the website or whatever. Do you have any problems with your landlord? Do you want to talk to him? Do you feel comfortable coming up on stage to talk about it? And then just making a note of that. And then when we run the meeting, obviously have like just a mini agenda. And the main agenda point will probably be focusing on any campaigns that we have going on at the minute, sharing ideas, sharing disputes. But then actually, if people really need to like talk about their issues, we let them talk about their issues like straight away. And then people in the audience can be like, yeah, I know about that. And then that's where the exciting stuff happens, because then what you do is you say, right, so actually, Cassie, you had a problem with that similarly, didn't you, last week? Amina, you also had that as well. So do you guys want to like group up and help Toby like talk about this issue? And then all of a sudden you've got like people who are experienced helping other people, each person teaching another person. And that's how a campaign gets born, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I really love what you're saying about having childcare. I love what you're saying about not drinking there because you want it to be accessible to the large Muslim population in Manchester. That's super real. While you were talking, why was I reminded? Oh, it was funny as hell, right? You were saying about the sesh. I was reminded, there's an example I didn't put in the notes, which was Sisters Uncut doing a lot of this kind of democratic organizing, because I recently read Abolition Revolution by two abolitionist feminists from Sisters Uncut, and they said abolition is the pre-drinks, revolution is the sesh.
That's so good.
I wanted to
That's
highlight
so
Sisters because like I think that kind of again, like I don't mean to harp on this too much, but like when we talk about like democratic structure in organizing, like it is just like gasoline on the fire of your org. Like people struggle so much when they try to launch themselves into like, we are going to constitute, we are going to figure out exactly what this org is about, we're going to have the structure completely rigid and it's going to achieve these goals by doing these things. And it's like it's lucky if that takes off. Like it's, you've done something well, maybe you've got some like charismatic people in there who know how to get people together, who know how to get shit done, but it's like most people are way more empowered by this kind of thing, like you're describing, where they come together and there's just the kind of just enough structure to pull people together to solve their problems together, like your Cassie and Mina in your tenants assembly example. I think that's exactly it. Another example I wanted to talk about was, Kira, have you met people who've been in the DSA?
Yes.
That's exactly the response I thought you'd get. By which I mean the tenuous and immediately wanting to distance from the very liberal and boring DSA. The DSA is fascinating, right? Because they aren't good at getting shit done, but they have a huge membership and they are good at holding big assemblies. And so your face. Because, right, what's fascinating to me about the DSA is like I've been like interviewing activists and organizers for about 3 years now, and we've had several examples of this on the show. Is we have American activists come on, and part of their story of how they've done what they've done is they were in the DSA, right? And when we get used to hearing this, we get used to going, oh yeah, and it was too liberal, so you left, right? Like this is that's the thing you hear all the time. It's like, well, they weren't getting shit done and they were quite liberal, so we left to form an actual like revolutionary org, or an org that was at least actually helping anyone. And like there's this concept I'd like to introduce here, right? People talk about in systems engineering, which is I always forget the exact wording of it, but it's the purpose of a system is what it does, right? So like when we talk about the police, right? People might tell you the system of the police is there to uphold the law, right? But then you look at the outcomes of what the police is doing and you see a lot of fucking racism. And so you're like, well, the purpose of a system is what it does. Like another way that I've like spent a long time trying to make this distinction is the systemic versus the systematic. Like people talk about systemic failure, like you've got this system, it's meant to do these things, it's failing to do that. That's a systemic failure, right? I prefer the systematic analysis, right? Each day the cops get up, put on their uniforms, decide to not be human beings and go out and brutalize brown people. That means that the function of cops systematically is to brutalize brown people, right? The DSA, right? The system of the DSA is supposedly gonna bring together all the socialists in America, and then what? I mean, I honestly, like, I don't even know what the fuck they claim that they're gonna do. But right, my argument, and this is actually a positive argument, I think, for the DSA, is the function, the purpose of a system is what it does, right? Like the reason we hear all these stories about people who were in the DSA and then they found a bunch of other people in the DSA who wanted to get shit done and were really frustrated that it wasn't, and they organized and they formed an org and left, right? Because this is another thing. Like we talk to these people and we're saying like, I don't know if you have this, Kira, like when you've heard it a few times about the DSA, you hear someone say, I was in the DSA, and you start to go like, yeah, I know how this, yeah, I know exactly how the fuck this goes, right? And like, I've had it a couple of times where I've started to jump onto that and be like, yeah, fuck the DSA. And then people have been like, we're okay. Like not had the kind of animosity that I've had for it. And I'm just like, well, what's happening is they're the assembly, right? Like they're doing really good assemblies. Like they're giving people a space, like a reaction chamber to like come together and actually form into shit that's like actually useful. And like, I don't know if they know that's what they're doing. I don't know if like they're not setting out to like get people to like make better orgs than the DSA, but it is what they're doing, right? Yeah.
And that's a good function.
And
Actually.
that's exactly
a
right.
good function. Yeah.
And then you have the people that are in it and they're like committed to being in it and committed to the DSA itself and like kind of get peeved when people break off.
Yeah.
Because the DSA is the biggest socialist organization in America.
Which I think the IWW would have some
therefore
notes on that, by
socialism.
the way. But
Yeah, therefore, if it's called socialist and it's big, that means we all have to like it because otherwise we're against socialism.
Right.
It sounds like the Socialist Workers' Party in the UK.
The
Sounds
DSA is
kinda
better
similar
than
to
them,
that.
and I mean crucially
Yeah.
like bigger than them and much more democratic than them. But yeah, like
Right,
they are
okay,
doing that.
okay.
The thing you're pointing at is the same, which is like them saying we're really big and important. That's the same thing they do, yeah, while
Of
getting
course.
nothing fucking done. But yeah, like I think that. So I think what's actually cool, but by accident, about the DSA is this thing I'm pointing to. Like they serve as this melting pot, and like people get together and then they form orgs and then they leave, right? But like you say, Kira, like then there are the people who actually form in my analogy, I guess they're the part of the pot, right? Like they're the pot, and then the stuff getting melted and fused and reacting, and then it leaves, right? Like they get pissed off that stuff is coming out of their assemblies. And they shouldn't be, right? They should be holding like a space that is welcoming to those people to come back if they want and continue to react and like be part of the assembly. This is getting on to what I would like to call, until someone has a better name for it, my dissolution reconstitution organizing model, which is that assemblies give space.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say you mean fungus thought. But
it's a part of fungus thought for sure.
Okay.
Assemblies give space to work out and invent new structures. Structures actually get things done, right? And then those experiences can be fed back into assemblies, and they can assess, like, are the structures getting the shit done that they're supposed to do? Do we need new structures? Do we need to get rid of the structures that we have? Are there problems in them? All these kinds of things, right? And I just think that, like, basically, assembly to org to assembly to org to assembly to org, like over and over and over again. Like if an activist found their trajectory to be that they were in an assembly and then they formed an org and then they were in an assembly and then another org, like that, right? That would be fantastic. That would be a really healthy sign for the kind of like ecosystem of revolutionary potential going on. And I think that like, so to then give the DSA its due criticism, right, is that like a lot of people's trajectory is just, I was in a DSA assembly and I was fucking falling asleep, and I turned to the guy next to me and I was like, hey, how about we actually get food to kids? And then we left, right? And it's like what you want instead is, and then we spent 5 years getting food to kids and we learned a lot of stuff. So we came back to the DSA and we told them what's fucking what, and they listened. And then we made an even better org that gave food to kids and started a fucking clinic in a poor neighborhood giving free healthcare, right?
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's the ideal process. Like the way that I do kind of envision that working for GMTU as well, because you will always get people who are frustrated with the, you know, if an org is doing a thing, an org is not going to be potentially doing other things, right? I know that sounds fairly simple, but for example, GMTU, we focus on tenants issues, you know, housing, disrepair, and there might be some people who come to us and they say, well, what about, you know, homeless people who are homeless now? What about rehousing? And we turn around and say, well, you know, often what we say in GMTU is that unfortunately we don't really have the capacity to help people with rehousing at the minute, because that gets a lot like casework and that can burn people out really easy, essentially. And it sucks that we have to say that, right? But ideally, what you would get from that is someone who's come to an assembly with this issue, gone like, oh, that's a bit shit. You know, maybe they're annoyed at us. Maybe they like, you know, they get like a little bit more radicalized by that, and they go, fuck it, I'm just gonna try and organize something to help people get rehoused, right? I'm gonna try and help to organize people. Not that I would condone this, but crack buildings and squat in them, right? You know, and if that comes from GMTU assemblies, having like a kind of, you know, I wouldn't say a rigid structure, but just sort of like trying to focus at least on the issues that we have organized to face. That's just based, right? That's exactly what you want. And then if they come back to us and they say, actually, we've done this for like a couple of years now and it's really, really good. Maybe the committee might want to discuss about like, you know, supporting us and, you know, providing support and this kind of stuff, like, you know, for eviction resistances and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's actually how these things grow and become larger, sort of, you know, when I mentioned fungus thought earlier, I thought you were, you know, going to talk about fungus thought. But it's actually like a really good thing if a structured org has a lot of affinity groups come out of it, right? Like affinity groups who, you know, might not want to organize, but then also conversely other orgs.
Yeah.
Because if you've got lots of different orgs all over doing the same thing, it's actually not bad, because that means that if one org gets kind of like destroyed or whatever, or people decide to leave it or whatever, then you've already got all these other things. Like you cannot kill the movement in any way that matters, essentially.
Bingo. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so it. Absolutely. So I actually wrote a piece a little bit ago about assemblies, and since this episode's about assemblies, and since I'm determined to convince everyone that assemblies are the fucking way and one of the most important things, I'm not going to like read it off or anything, but like I want to run through some points I made in that. Initially, I made it as a very long Tumblr post because I'm one of those. And then I remade it for Patreon because I kind of realized, so it was a Tumblr post I made in response to the CAS review. We have been covering the CAS review in the news on Red Planet, but if people aren't aware, the UK government is making moves to eliminate healthcare for under 25s. It's pretending it's doing this through like making a separate service. In practice, like that's not what's going to happen, right? But it's brought about yet another big wave of panic in the trans community in the UK. And so I made this initially to talk about the UK trans organizing scene. And then I realized that like it applies just as much for trans people everywhere that we're facing eliminationist rhetoric, right? I am personally like a little skeptical of like kind of what you'd call trans separatist organizing, just because like we're a very small minority and like we have to work together with other people. I think Mule, I think you've been to a trans assembly in Manchester, right, where I can't remember if you were saying like cis people, what was cis people's level of engagement there?
So, for example, I went there to represent Greater Manchester Tenants Union, and I was allotted like a bit of time to talk about how we could support trans people, and that was it. Really, it was kind of like cisgender people were told, you could be there, but don't contribute, essentially. So anytime like an issue was brought up to the floor, it was like cisgender people just don't say anything, basically. So just and it was kind of worded as like cis people need to do quote unquote grunt work, which I resent a little bit, because it's like, all right, you don't need to call us grunts. I'm happy to cook your food, but like, I'm not like a
Well, I mean,
like
it's devaluing what that labor is, right? Like if you are talking about cooking the food or whatever, it's not unimportant labor. Like
no, exactly,
whatever,
yeah. So it's like very important stuff, and it's like, okay, well, I guess we just do that. But I think the thing that you're getting at is the thing that I told you about, where there was a discussion about people were asking questions about things like trade union donations and how to go to your trade union and present a motion to them to get like a donation done. And nobody knew how to do that in the room,
right?
In the assembly that I was at, except for me, apparently, and I wasn't allowed to give that advice,
Right.
yeah. And then another thing came up about like, oh, are there any places that we can go that are like free and they're more central? And I had like 10 places in my head that I wanted to tell people, essentially. Yeah.
Well, it's like I'm not saying this to say that like I'm not trying to launch into a big downer on trans separatist organizing, but I'm just trying to highlight that like organizing that is specifically targeted at helping trans people specifically, because we are under attack specifically as trans people, will need to involve cis people in a pretty serious way. And like if you are, for example, like one example that you've just given, right, is like if someone's putting a question to the floor, right, like does anyone know this thing? But you've made a policy cis people do not speak in this assembly. That's like, you are just eliminating out potential information you could gather, right? As opposed to if you said, we have this many slots for trans people to speak for 5 minutes each, and we have this many slots fewer for cis people to speak for 3 minutes each, right? Like that's a different thing, isn't it? But yeah, so I mean, what I was talking about was basically, and I'm sharing, I want to share this in this Assemblies discussion. So like, do let me know if you want to like get across onto a different topic. I'm not just trying to make this like all trans the rest of the episode, but like it's just because this is the thing that I wrote, right? But I think this could apply to lots of communities and lots of marginalized communities, especially. Is like when you're under attack and you aren't sure what to do, like a lot of people get. I've honestly been comparing it a little bit to startup brain recently, and maybe that's just because of my experiences. And like when I dropped out of university, I worked in tech startups for a little bit, but like it's something I've seen is like the kind of mindset that people have, that I'm gonna like invent something and start a company, and then I'm gonna solve everything, and I'm gonna get super rich, right? And in a quite similar way, and I wonder how much this is like the individualism bred into us in neoliberal society. Like I see a lot of people approaching organizing in a frankly pretty similar way, where they're like, I'm going to come up with the org, and I'm going, or it's a little bit more communist than that. They go like, me and my 3 friends are going to come up with the org that is going to change everything, and we're going to do it, and then it's going to be done, right? And it's like, I'm just like, if you're dedicated to making the org that's going to change everything, the org you need to make is a very minimal structure that is an assembly. Like if you want to have the maximum impact on your community, hold an assembly. Like get people together and get them to just discuss what their issues are, and get them to like ask each other, ask the floor, does anyone have any suggestions for how we solve this fucking problem? Because firstly, like you get people together and you just ask them like, what is on your mind? Even as basic a question as that, like you've got like depoliticized community members who know that like they're experiencing in this example like transphobia. They know their rights are under attack, but they aren't like ideologically cohesive to the org of the structure that you've made, the assembly, whatever, right? They are just people who have problems. And you ask them like, what are your problems? And then then suddenly you have a bunch of people highlighting that they have the same problems. And inevitably what will happen, because human beings are creative animals, right, is that people will start to say, well, I think the solution to this problem is this, right? And then other people will have different answers and they will start arguing it out, right? And now there are problems at this in the sequence of events I'm describing, right? There are problems of like of I already mentioned the idea of a constitution of the org that is creating the space for people to have the assembly. Okay, that is a problem. That's the thing you need to figure out, but you need to figure it out, unfortunately. Like there's the problem of them arguing, right? When we get to this step, like people arguing, this is something you need to have in that constitution. What is the protocol for how people have those arguments? And what kind of culture are you encouraging in your assembly? Like, are people allowed to get heated? Is there some kind of moderator who steps in if someone yells? You know, like what kind of structures do you have in place for this? But you make them as minimal as possible to allow the maximum amount of discussion and flexibility. And that's a big crux of like what I was getting across in the piece, is just that like if you want this, right, like if you want to make the most impact on the community and you want to help trans people with the genocide that we are facing in multiple countries around the world right now, then the biggest thing you could start doing today is just booking a fucking venue, figuring out the answers to all the tough questions with some of your friends, right? Writing a constitution for what the structure of the assembly does, not what everyone who takes part in the assembly does, right? Because let's say you're a bunch of anarchists, right? And then some Marxist trans people, I have not been holding myself back from saying slurs for the last 5 months. I just had to remember that YouTube has terms of service. A bunch of Marxist transgender people show up and they want to take part in the discussion, right? They're not ideologically cohesive to your anarchist assembly org, right? But they absolutely are trans people who have a voice and want to be part of this discussion. So you're not asking people to like sign, subscribe to the Constitution when they show up. Your Constitution is for you, and the floor is for everyone, and that's a crucial concept, right? Yeah,
I think that's so important because that's something that we've really had to think about quite deeply with GMTU, right? Because at the end of the day, you can get people who hear this vision of what we're doing, but if you really talk about the fact that we're going off the Soviet model of dual power, people are going to be like, oh, Soviets? Oh, I see. They're dictators. They're communists. They're going to murder everyone, a gajillion billion dead, Vuvuzela iPhone, right?
George
So
Orwell in 1967, Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
This is what they want. And this is why we say fungus thought and we talk about the sesh, because what do British people love? Drinking and drugs. So they will get excited. They think they're going to take some shrooms with Mule.
Exactly.
Love drinking, ate communism, simple as.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing, because even though Tim did that sort of like very caricatured British individual, there are definitely those kinds of people who are going to show up to these assemblies, and we have to sort of like account for like, okay, right, as long as they're not like a weird Brit fascist and they're not talking about boats and they're not talking about migrants coming over here stealing our houses and stuff, they still might just be very liberal. They might be very sort of like, depoliticized. And so we have to think about the way in which we word things and the way in which we that we accept people of other sort of like political ideas kind of thing. Because the way in which we've done this with GMTU in talking about this with the committee and having like I think we have a code of conduct, it's called. Yeah, it is called a code of conduct now. And essentially, the long and short of it is that we're here to talk about housing. Any other kind of political ideas you might have can be had outside of the assembly, can be had outside of the GMTU space. So that's like a super important one to have. You're absolutely like spot on. It's like you if you're organizing around a particular issue, like Sophie said, trans liberation, with us it's housing and tenant power. You do have to have this degree of focus, and you do have to have this degree of understanding. And dogma it's not going to save you. You know what I mean? You might find that you're organizing with an absolutely bizarre, COVID denier, whatever. As long as they're not like saying this COVID denying stuff like in the meetings, then you can effectively, organize with them.
Keep your politics out of my Soviet assembly.
Yeah, exactly. Literally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's it.
I like my Soviet assemblies without woke agenda.
Yeah.
They ruined
Give me
USSR by going
Direct
woke.
democracy without the politics. Thank you very much.
The betrayal of the revolution was actually when Lenin started using pronouns. That was the real
Yeah.
downfall of the Soviet vision.
Mm,
So I think that that transitions nicely to one thing I was saying in this trans organizing piece, which was about solidarity with other marginalized people, right? Because when you're saying it as like other kinds of political discussion are not for this housing assembly, this is a housing assembly about housing, right? It's like, but if enough people, you were telling me that the Madrid tenants union, they were saying that like fash gangs help landlords evict tenants.
That's right.
Okay, so here's that example, and then I'll go to my analogy with trans people. If enough people in the housing assembly there were like, we got to do something about these fascists, right? Because they are terrorizing us as tenants, then the assembly would come together and go, yeah, we do have to do something about these fascists. And then like an anti-fascist bloc might well form out of the assembly, and that would not be outside of the discussion of what tenants need, right? Similarly, like, so my analogy is, if you're just getting a bunch of trans people together to discuss what issues trans people face, right? A bunch of them will talk about how many of them are doing sex work, and that's not outside of the trans space. Like that's not outside of the political space of the trans assembly. And so political solidarity forms in a much more natural way. And like this sounds like I'm highlighting a positive rather than describing avoiding a problem. So here's the problem, right? You're writing your constitution. You're a bunch of very woke, very right-on anarchists who have all the good politics. Well done. That's good for you. I'm really proud of you. And it's going right up on the fridge. But your constitution, if got Mule again, that's why I do this show, really. It's just to make Mule laugh. If your constitution says like these are our principles, right, and so your code of conduct is saying don't be racist in the assembly, we will ask you to leave, that's one thing, that's fine, right? If your code of conduct is like we are a decolonial org who are seeking to reverse the historic effects of imperialism, right? It's like there is an intersection, yes, right? But if your assembly is talking about trans issues, now, of course, there are intersections of all forms of oppression, right? But if it doesn't spring out naturally, right, then in making it, this is a point where you're making your constitution require ideological purity rather than seeking organic solidarity, right? So like if you have, so then if your assembly is a racially diverse assembly and a bunch of non-white trans people speak on issues that they face as people racialized other than white, right? Then that might be a place where organic political solidarity comes out. Go back to my earlier example, right? Like an org might form out of your trans assembly that's trying to help trans sex workers, that's creating a structure that is doing something to help trans sex workers, right? In the same way, like an assembly that was sex workers might do the same thing. Like I said this in the piece, an assembly of sex workers or an assembly of trans people is more likely to form an effective political org that is helping trans sex workers than the like activist faction of either group. Now, this is a really crucial concept I want to get across, right? Is the activist faction. I'm speaking to the activist faction here. We're all the activist faction. We're all the politicized members. All of us on the show and listening and watching, we are politically informed. We are plugged in. And we are literally having a discussion right now about how to organize, right? But we aren't most people. And we want to empower most people to help most people to have the most effect, right? And so when you're talking about the benefits of assemblies, it's really crucial for us to do a sort of like ideologically reflexive, a sort of introspection, and look at our own like short-sightedness, right? Which is really hard to do because like we obviously have the correct politics that's going right up on the fridge. Like our politics is right. And so like there are no problems with it. And I'm not going to highlight problems with our politics. I'm just going to say that whenever you apply any framework onto the real world, some parts of reality slip through the cracks. And by contrast, if you hand a mass of people a blank page and you say what's bothering you, and then you start to clump together what do they have in common about what their problems are, you form the framework and then you form the structure to deal with those problems, instead of saying, I have read a book about how hard it is for trans sex workers of color, so I am going to, despite being white, I am going to form an org, right? Because I'm in the activist faction, I'm going to seek out the most oppressed people I can find, right? And I'm going to help them the most, right? And I'm not saying this is, now I'm getting a little caricaturish, right? But like, it is this sort of like taking on the burden of getting the organizing done, and not in the ways that help. That is one of the biggest problems of the activist faction, right? Taking on the burden of like, I'm going to have the big brain genius communist ideas that are going to solve every single problem, rather than enacting democracy and empowering other people to become more politicized as well, right? I'm not just, Mule's example just now, right, was like a COVID denier, right? And it's like, we don't necessarily want your like COVID denier, someone who's plugged into like God knows what, like misinformation spaces and conspiracy theories, to just get into an org and hold a high up position on an executive committee. We want them to get involved in an org and become politicized in the correct direction, form authentic, connections with their comrades, and like get fucking hyped. We also want them to like have experience consciousness raising and their politics to change. We do want that, right? If they are to be involved long term, right? And it's not going to happen through them being like debated, and it's not going to happen by them being given a ton of book recommendations, as much as I would love for it to. I wish that simply skipping through the streets, throwing library cards at people helped, but last time I was asked to stop. So instead, right, we have to talk about like how people get politicized. And it's that process, right? This is a huge thing. I said this in my article as well. Like, assemblies have a huge opportunity to politicize people just in doing the consciousness raising, but you could also like have a reading group afterwards. You could also have spaces in and around the assemblies where people are plugging into the politics that you think like, you want to share.
I think, yeah, it's important to remind people that assemblies are not necessarily the whole org. Like, everything that the org does is an assembly. It's only ever an assembly. No, it's massively and vitally important that you do other stuff. For example, like Sophie said, reading group, or you might have a community meal. You might have a community get together, a dance, a music event. All these kinds of things are extremely important, because I can't even begin to tell you just how fucking boring everything is when it's like another meeting.
So I want to talk about this idea of the constitution of the assembly, and I want to talk about what that is getting done, because I would really like for people to come out of this episode with the possibility of going and actually starting an assembly. Okay, here's a good place we can start. Mule mentioned not drinking at the assemblies to make it an accessible space for the Muslim population, right? So things that you can think about to make your space accessible is something you would want to have figured out in your constitution. That is a thing that you, when you get together with, again, like not that many people, like you're forming such a thin structure that enables this much bigger structure to take place. You have to answer certain questions that are really tricky, and I certainly don't have all the examples of this myself. Definitely, like any examples that you think of. But yeah, like sobriety is a good one, right? It doesn't mean, I said this in the article, it doesn't mean like there's a trans person who's had a joint on the way, so you can smell weed on them, so turn them away from the assembly and they don't get to be a part of it. That's not it, right? But like if as lots of trans people are, conversely to lots of trans people take drugs, a lot of trans people are in recovery from taking drugs, right? And need a space where they aren't going to be exposed to ongoing drug use right then in front of them, right? So if they feel like, hey, this event said I'm going to have my voice heard, right? And then they show up and people are smoking weed there, that is going to turn them away, right? So that's an example of something you could put in your constitution that makes it accessible to the community you're actually targeting,
What Sophie is elucidating here is the difference between like an ideology that it just exists in your brain, and maybe you tell another person it and they tell you that ideology back, so you feel like you're actually doing the thing, versus actually doing the thing and actually being pragmatic about it. Like, what's the purpose of the no booze? Is it for ideological purity to be manifested in the real world, or is there an actual practical reason for it? And yes, there's a practical reason for it to make the space more accessible, more inclusive. So yeah, thank you for explaining that, Soph.
Yeah, well, so I mean, this is something that's going into the ZAD documentary. When we were on the ZAD and we were chatting with Jay, it's just incredible line that they said, and like I was a bit overwhelmed by just like all of the incredible shit I saw when we were on the ZAD and all the incredible things that all the people there said. But Mule highlighted this to me when he was doing the editing, and he was like, Jay said this fucking thing, like, and it's really stuck with me. Purity is the antechamber of fascism, right? Like before like fascist movements form, first you have people who are just insisting on absolute purity of whatever kind. And it's like, sure, this is less likely to happen in communist, socialist, anarchist spaces. But this mantra of like this, just rule of thumb of like purity is the antechamber of fascism. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Like this kind of dogmatism is not like, and I mean, this is the thing, like if you have a population who are broadly just like very anti-authoritarian or anti-fascist, they are just going to be turned away from your thing. Like the outcome is not going to be that they like form a fascist movement, but that's still a negative outcome, right? And it's because they're identifying like, no, I don't fucking vibe with this. This sucks shit. Actually, I'm being asked to be ideologically pure in order to enter.
I can definitely give you some stuff because I'm in an org that has a constitution. So, for example, one really good one with GMTU is that you just cannot be on the committee or even related to a committee if you're not a tenant, right? You can't make like essentially like you could like, because we did the constitution as a committee, so you can't contribute to things like the constitution if you're not a tenant. So that's a good one. I'm just kicking off. If anyone, any of the other hosts, Tim, Kira, wanna jump in? Or
I've seen quite a few orgs down here that will have in their constitution some kind of commitment to so for those that don't know, there's in Aotearoa we have like the Treaty of Waitangi, and it's like the idea of like being a good treaty partner or whatever like that is like that's part of the commitments that people that are non-Maori have to live in New Zealand. Well, like it doesn't really play out like that, but it's part of the thing. So a lot of leftist orgs will have like some kind of mention to like treaty obligations in their constitution, and usually that just means like it's kind of like a declaration of like anti-racism or something like that. But I have seen it pop up a couple times. Like, I mean, it's infinitely more relevant when you're talking about things like, like prison abolition and stuff like that, because we have like such a high incarcerated Maori population. But like, even just in other stuff, and this might mean like if an org is like, if they might be like organizing some kind of like public protest in an area, they might approach mana whenua, so like the group that they're in like the kind of tribal territory of first. And like when we did like the kind of protests to protest Posey Parker when she was over here. So the organizers got in touch with mana whenua, and there was actually, so the mana whenua of Central Auckland is like Ngāti Whātua Oraki, and so they actually had a contingent of people from mana whenua that came to that, and were part of it and stuff. So that's cool. Even just as like, I would say, even like it is kind of silly, but even just as a lip service thing, sometimes it does tell you a little bit about what that org is about if you see something like that in their charter. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like super necessary or whatever, because like, I guess like the proof is in the pudding, versus like I have seen a lot of like liberal kind of orgs say stuff like that and put it in their constitutions, and then it's just like they're like upholding kind of white hegemony, and it's it depends on their understanding of what that might actually mean. But that's something that is unique to down here that I've seen a little bit. Anyone else got any examples?
That actually reminds me of during the, I think it was the Starbucks union sweep, which is still happening, by the way, but when it was like starting, was it Starbucks or Amazon? Oh, I forget. There was some huge corporation that was holding a meeting to basically plan to bust the unions that were like spreading through their company. And they started with a land like declaration. They were like talking about like, we sit on this stolen land and so and so forth. And then they proceeded.
Many such cases.
And then they proceeded to like discuss the ins and outs of how they're going to bust the unions. It's just like,
my synapses are like firing as soon as you said that. I've heard that, like I know exactly what you're talking about, but just not the name.
It's like the CIA recruitment ad where she's like, I'm a cisgender millennial Latinx woman diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I think one important thing to look at with the idea of constituting an org that is holding an assembly is or two. Okay, I've actually got two things that I think are important. One is like about the way that you are handling what people are saying, right? Like this is one broad topic that maybe we'll keep on coming back to probably. But like one thing I touched on in the article was I was talking at some point with someone who was looking at like using her privilege to like put up the cash to get the venue booked to hold assemblies, and I said like, well, I raised the point that like probably every single trans person is going to use the last 30 seconds of their allotted time to say, and I have a GoFundMe for my surgery or whatever. I've got a legal battle. I've got a rent problem. I need help affording HRT. Any of these things. So check that out. You can find it by Googling this. And she asked if that should be allowed, which was a hell of a moment. But like, but it relates to this question of like how you process the speech that is going on, right? Like, are there things that you like when you say, like Mule's example earlier, like all the discussion in here is about housing because we're here as a housing assembly, like what stuff you define as not being in there, right? And like I would say this one's super clear cut. It's like if trans people are asking for people to check out their GoFundMe and there are a lot of time, that is obviously just like yes, it is within the trans people's problems that they're talking about, and B, should be considered and collected as like, hey, trans people need money. That's a problem we all share. We should think about that. Like, but what kind of rules you place on speech is going to be like, and then even do you want to like step away from the idea of rules on speech, like, and not to make free speech arguments because these are just like fash arguments in disguise, but like but rather like, do you step away from what people are allowed or not allowed to say to some other kind of model? This is a really interesting question. And then the other topic I wanted to raise as a big challenge in constituting an assembly structure is divorcing the assembly structure from those assembled, right? So one big one, someone, I hope I'm not giving too much away, but someone, I've said in my most base things, people came to me and asked me for help with organizing stuff. And someone came to me and talked to me a little bit about harm reduction for drug users. And we talked a bunch about the assembly model. And I said, conflict resolution is going to be a huge thing that you're going to need to figure out for your assemblies for a harm reduction hub for drug users, because like you're just going to run into this 10 trillion times, is that one person has come to the assembly and another person has come to the assembly, have beef because they're both drug users who are in community with each other. That shit happens, right? And if one of them has a problem with the other one taking the mic because they have serious beef, like then is the other person going to say they were platformed by your org, right? Are they going to say like the org let this bad person speak, right? And then so if you and then the problem is like if you then posit yourself as having some kind of conflict resolution system as the org, you've just gotten yourself into massive hot water. Like immediately you're just going to like, that's a nightmare. We talked with Cradle community about this. They were like, we are trying to spread the ideas of transformative and restorative justice around. We are not offering this service to people because that's a fucking nightmare, right? And it is like, you need to empower people to solve their own problems this way. You can't do it for them.
Yeah, and yeah, like you just said, like what makes them, it's like saying, well, it's like what Mule was saying earlier with how sometimes people come to his org like looking for a service.
Yeah.
Because people are so used to like purchasing services and like getting and outsourcing instead of like actually, like it's such a radical idea to actually take your fate into your own hands and actually like
it's tempting to
it.
look at the individualist and capitalist mindset there, but like let's just be fair as possible here. They're tired. Those people are fucking tired, and they want someone else to solve their problem.
I'm passing a moral judgment right
yeah,
now.
no,
I'm
just
passing more
saying,
of like a cause and effect from just living in this world. Both what you're saying, and that, thank you for mentioning it, that like just literally just tired and just working 3 jobs and like a single parent types, you know, lots of people just don't have the capacity.
I would like to interject here and say it is actually both. It's actually a very good combination of both.
Which was what I was about to say, Mule. But thank you for making sure your cis man voice will overcome this woman trying to speak her mind and express herself.
I was actually
think it's a good
literally
move.
about to also say that it was both, and I agree with Kira.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Kira, for your contributions. I really value you. Anyway, but the problem of people being tired, right? I just want to quickly, I think that we let it go by too quickly earlier, but Mule talked about childcare and taking that one step further, right? On the one hand, it would be really bad idea for your assembly to say we will solve people's conflicts. Super bad idea. I hope I don't need to explain to people why that would be a bad idea, but like it would. But on the other hand, right, where you do choose to get involved, a really good example is just places where it makes people's lives easier, right? So like childcare is a great one. Food is another one, right? If people are fucking tired and they need a reason to come to your assembly, fucking give them free food at the assembly. They will show the fuck up, you know, just like, and I think Mule was saying earlier about, you know, like having events, having music and dancing or whatever, like that's great as well. But just like, you know, it helps to overcome that energy hump directly of just that like deficit of like, can I be bothered to go to this thing tonight? I'm fucking tired and I got to think about hang on, like there's free food at the thing. So like it might be a bit boring and maybe I don't have loads to say tonight, but there is free food. So like, you know, so it's like, that's the other top. So the two things I wanted to say broadly are like, decide how you're processing like what people say at the assembly and what your constitution has to say about that. And also how involved you're getting with the community. And it's really important to remember which ones, like, you know, which one's actually helpful and which one's actively detrimental, right? And like saying that it's basically like anywhere where people's needs are getting met, fantastic. And anywhere where you're trying to ideologically enforce people, fucking dreadful, right? Like anytime that you're being like, we are going to, involve in a way where like we're saying what's right, whether it's like what politics people believe, how a conflict shakes out, all of this, like nightmare. But if you're just feeding people childcare, etc., like this is great. All right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's time to move over to questions.
I think so, because we've got quite a few
We
of
have
them
a
now.
lot. Thank you, chat.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
chat.
chat stepped up. So we got a bunch here. So, okay, Praise the Sun asks, for the UK hosts, what do you think the UK's role in the Zionist project is going to be in the coming years? Do you see your fellow Brits turning more towards or more against the Zionism now?
Mule is indicating that he's giving the floor to me, which is also because of our stern reminder earlier. This plays into a broader question about politics in the UK, which is to do with the ruling class in the UK and the working class in the UK, right? Our fellow Brits fucking loathe Israel and show up in their hundreds of thousands to tell Israel to get fucked. Frequently, right? Hundreds of workers for a Free Palestine shut down the Trade Department. Hundreds of workers up and down the country constantly showing up to shut down Elbit factories, BAE Systems, blockade, everything, right? Like it's going on constantly. In the numbers, the British people are so fucking against the genocide, like everyone everywhere. What is worth pointing out about the UK is the degree to which the ruling class don't give the slightest fuck about public opinion, because, and I think this breeds an enormous amount of complacency, the ruling class have such a tight grip on the media and manufacturing consent machine, right? That they've lost track of where public opinion actually is to a huge degree, right? They have a tight grip on media, and they have a tight grip on the police, right? And so they're like, the material effects of this can't hurt us because we can stamp out all protest. We've put in these anti-protest laws, right? We've got the media, which is the official record of what people think, says that people agree with what we're saying, right? The fucking rags, the reactionary rags like the Daily Heil, that fucking people think are the papers for the working class or whatever, right, are printing racist and shitty and horrible opinions. Therefore, it must be that everyone in the working class all think those things, right? Surely. And it's like, no, of course not. This came literally from a billionaire. Like, what are you talking about? But in having such a tight grip on these two things, they think they've got everything, right? But something that is fantastic that Shanice McBean and Adia Sarah Day point out in Abolition Revolution is that when Robert Peel, former Prime Minister and inventor of the modern police force, was laying out the Peelian principles of policing, a crucial one is policing by consent, right? And tied into that is the idea in people's minds that the police are part of them, right? That the police are not an outside force coming into their communities and enforcing the law, right, from the government or the king or whatever the fuck, right? But rather that the police force and the civilian population are one and the same and feed back into each other. And the thing I think the British ruling class is not quite getting is that the public opinion is massively turning to a point where like they are an absolute razor's edge in terms of policing by consent, right? There was this massively high profile case of a police officer raping and murdering a woman called Sarah Everard that sparked a massive discussion of specifically feminist abolition discourse in the UK. Since then, there have been the anti-protest laws that, in an attempt to reinforce this policing by consent idea, like the Metropolitan Police said, oh, that's a bit far, we don't want to use those powers, but they have those powers. And the thing is, as soon as they start using them too much, this illusion of policing by consent is going to fucking evaporate. And it doesn't matter how much, at that point, the media print fascist lies, like pretending to be the voice of the people. It doesn't matter how much the media then say, like, these woke pro-Palestine protesters are blah, 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 because the people will feel that the police are an outside force and that they are in open conflict with them. And at that point, we already have the numbers. So I hope that is a comprehensive answer to that question. Mule, you have a take?
That was beautifully put, Soph.
Yeah, no notes. Perfect. Yep.
Cool. In that case, Wintry Mute, who I've never heard of in my life, says, how would you handle some attendance of an assembly taking up a disproportionate amount of time available? From my experience, there are always people who love to talk, who take up a lot of space.
I would love to field this because I know exactly what Wintry Mute, who I also have never heard of, is saying here, because this is a very, very common thing that happens in tenants unions. And I know she's probably speaking from experience, because what tends to happen, especially when you're speaking to people who have never had their concerns actually genuinely listened to before, it turns into a moaning session. And that is good, right? Because people need that. They need that social connection. And like for example, Middleton, right? Middleton is an absolutely fantastic place in Manchester, where we started to organize as part of our strategic plan for 2022, 2023, 2024. And what we found whenever I've been there is that people will just be like, yeah, that's exactly what Riverside Housing said to me. Yeah, that's exactly what Riverside Housing said to me. Yeah, that happened to me. My place is like that. They never come round. They never do anything. And it just becomes this massive moaning session. But that's good, because what it does is build strong ties. Now, what Joe's talking about is, how do you get that out of assemblies? Like, how do you get rid of that, right? How do you actually, prevent that from happening? Well, I'm gonna be honest, like I don't really have like a great answer for this, but to me, when I've thought about this in the past, it's just about having a very firm chair person. Like I just think that's what it is. Like, I think your chair, when you elect your chair, you have to elect someone who is there is a tendency in orgs to just like elect people because it's like fun. Like we're just having a laugh. Like, oh yeah, just elect like whoever to the chair position. But I think if you're gonna like elect a person to have a chair, they have to be what's the word? They have to be is it affirmative? They have to be assertive. That's the word I'm looking for. Assertive. They have to be assertive and firm, but also gentle. You don't want to elect like a Stalin. You don't want to elect like a Fash. You just want to elect like someone who knows the score, knows what the structure of the assembly is for, and is able to just sort of gently say to people, okay, sorry, we're just running out of time now. Can you finish up? Because we got a lot of stuff to get through. I just think it's that, because whenever I've experienced this, like for example in Middleton, the only reason that it ever goes on for so long is because whoever's chairing the meeting is very like, can we just, and that's like not, that's just, it's just one of those things, right? It's not a failing. It's not a horrible thing. It's a constructive criticism, essentially. I think even people like that can actually be steered to get more assertive. But I think in sort of nipping that in the bud, you want to elect a chair who is quite assertive and firm. Yeah.
I think the only thing I'd add on to that is frequency, because I do think that moaning is, as you said, like it can be good and it can be a necessary step. And I just want to point out what Mark Fisher was saying in Post-Capitalist Desire in his lecture series before he died, was talking about like the stages of consciousness raising, and one of the earliest stages is people just identifying they have the same problems. And so like I would just say frequency is a huge one. When I gave a couple speeches at trans rights protests in the UK, like someone who was at the time like very valued and dear friend of mine, like said she'd been to a lot of protests and it always felt like a poetry circle. It always felt like people just like venting their feelings about how hard it is to be trans, and that she'd never heard anyone try to propose any kind of solutions and direction and movement. And it was like, well, yeah, because I come at it from a revolutionary perspective, right? So that, like, I don't just want to get there and then talk about how fucked we are. I want to solve these problems. And I think that, like, I just think that, like, having been to lots of protests since then, I've seen that shift just because there have been more protests. When I spoke at a couple of these things, they were months apart, months and months and months apart, and there were barely any other trans protests at the time. And obviously, as things have heated up, that's not a good thing, but there have been more protests because of it, and then more of the same people have shown up. And it's just that thing, right? If you imagine you see the people you feel like you can complain to once every 6 months, you're going to complain every time you do, and then feel maybe a little better and go back to your life. But if you see them every day, it's not going to be that many days before you reach the decision point. Are we going to solve this problem, or are we going to not? Right? And you're going to decide you're going to fucking solve this problem. Any other hosts have anything for that? Since the question is about disproportionate speakers.
No, I think that's pretty good. We get a couple more, so we should keep getting through them. Another one from Wintry Mute, who we definitely have no knowledge of. How do you account for the fact that some of the most important voices to hear in these spaces, queer people, racialized people, women, etc., are often less vocal than cis men?
Well, I think, Tim, that
right. So I touched on this earlier already. But there are many different solutions to this problem. One I proposed earlier was, if you're having a trans assembly, you could have more slots for longer allotted for trans people to speak in, fewer and shorter for cis people to speak in, right? And but that works best if that's the focus of the assembly, right? If the assembly is for housing, right, being like cis men don't get to speak as much, it's going to be really hard to sell that to the assembly as the issue. I feel like, but I feel like
this is also something I think, like, a good chair, if like, can handle looking out at the crowd and being like, okay, look, like, we need to split this up a little bit. Like, hey, like, yeah, totally something that I think they can.
I do feel like a good chair is again, part of the answer here. I think that since these have been two questions in a row about the order in which people speak, like, two concepts I'd bring up quickly are the stack, and also the step up, step back model, or like principle. Like, it's less the stack is more of a model in which you, like, register that you have something to say, and then ideally it's that there is, again, like a chair, there's someone who is keeping track of who is going to speak next. Again, to go back to our analogy of the show itself, we've started using a thing where we have, like, we're doing the, like, emoji reacts on the Zoom call so that we can see who's going to speak. I know Kira has a point she wants to say in a minute. And so I'm obviously padding for as long as possible so that she never gets to speak for the rest of the episode. But
filibustered.
I'm filibustering Kira right now. And so somebody once told me the world was going to roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. No. So stack is one, and that again comes back to a good chair, and the other is, like, step up, step back, and that's much more about inculcating a good what's the word, like, just atmosphere, whatever, like, principles in the assembly, and that people share those principles, and that they all know to, like, step back and stop talking if Kira has a point.
And my point was, I also think, on top of all the suggestions given, that a good approach to this is handing out ball gags to all the cishet white men that walk in, and just, allowing them to volunteer to shut the fuck up, like, in a really sexually explicit way.
Yeah. Big fan of that, to be honest.
I definitely think as well, this is like, yes, absolutely everything that everyone has said is definitely, like, super important. I think that, like, having that education, actually anti-fascist education, like, in your org is so important, like anti-bigotry education. You just have to, like, make sure that whoever is going to be doing important stuff in your org is well read up on that stuff. Like, reach out to, there are organizations that provide training to organizations, like grassroots organizations. Like, we've had some with Neon and Rhizome are the companies that we've worked with at GMTU. Also, the Ella Baker School is really good. Like Ella Baker School has been giving us some information on how to actually talk to people who might exhibit reactionary opinions concerning housing and stuff like that. So there are resources for this. Just find them and make sure that you're engaging with them and trying to get trying to get actual support from these orgs that can do this as well. So,
yeah,
cool.
and that's for the people who are doing the organizing of it. In terms of getting the education into all the people assembled, again, this is another reason I'd promote getting a reading group going. You can have more, even if then those cishet white men don't go to the reading group and learn that they should shut up, the other people will go and learn that they should have a right to speak and hopefully feel more empowered too. Yeah. The next question from so this is a new user I don't see him before. Wintry Mute says, do you feel assemblies would work in a digital capacity for organizing around issues in communities of geographically distant people where it is harder to meet IRL? And the answer to that is yes. So the next question.
No, it is. It actually is really good. Like, there's so I mean, like the Maori word for an assembly is like hui, and we have a lot of huis for a lot of fucking different reasons or whatever. But it's like through lockdown, everything just immediately became Zoom huis or Zuis, and it was like for absolutely like anything. And it's super valuable for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah, I think we will actually just go into the next one, which is from Wintry Mute. And the question is, what weaknesses, if any, does an assembly model have? And like the alligator, the assembly hasn't evolved for 10 million years because it's already perfect. No, that's not true at all.
I think like some of the weaknesses are the things that like some of these questions are about addressing, right? Like about like not having a not having the structures in place to deal with people that are taking up too much time or people that are just whatever, like
I mean, I would say I think those are problems to overcome and less weaknesses of the model. So I think the fundamental weakness of the assembly model, and this is why I brought up the DSA so many times, is that it just doesn't do anything. Like on its own, doesn't do anything. And that's why I have this. Again, someone feel free to come up with a catchier name for this element of fungus thought, but like the dissolution reconstitution model of organizing. I really think people need to be having assemblies and then organizing and then going into an assembly again and then forming a new org and back and forth over and over again. Orgs get shit done, whether that org is an affinity group who are doing a direct action or it's a long-term org like a tenants union. Orgs get shit done. Assemblies help people, like let people decide things. So like, yeah, the fundamental weakness is that on its own it's nothing. But it's the phrase I really like, which is a cup without a handle is a bowl, a handle without a cup, it's nothing, right? Like yeah.
I think because if we think about like the assembly, like the big assembly, well, the assembly is an idea, right? And you can turn your assembly into various different things, and weaknesses will probably come out of those different things. And I think it is the job of the organization to just like identify those weaknesses and find ways to resolve them. Thus, the point of the assembly, the point of the assembly is to identify weaknesses within itself and remedy those. You have the tyranny of structurelessness, but I think also you have like the tyranny of structure, right? So I think having like a happy medium and a bit of flexibility and fluidity.
I'll ask the next one. This is from Great Crab 00. They're asking, could assemblies be used in suburbia?
I think so. Yeah, and I think it would be really interesting to do that because you would find a place where people think they don't have lots of problems. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, the problem here is that, in a sense, assemblies frequently are used in suburbia for like a neighborhood watch, town council thing, and actually this is where we bump into the getting shit done side of purity, is the antechamber of fascism, where like you have people who are doing the purity and they're into the fascism, and then
Yeah.
we're cooking.
I was gonna bring that up actually. Yeah, like I've seen this a couple times. There's like sometimes it's like there will be, I can't remember the name for it, but there is like a name for like a like a neighborhood kind of assembly sort of thing
Mm.
that I've heard quite a lot over here. I've had some experience with them in the past as well, and a lot of the times there will be someone that will someone that will organize this assembly, and nobody will go, or barely anyone will go, but they will still assume the authority of as if everyone had gone and agreed with them.
Christ.
So yeah. I think that's that's a thing that happens in the suburbs, but
Well, it's still kind of like using this electoral politics kind of brain in a way, where it's just like, well, if nobody, if way fewer people vote for the president in this upcoming election, someone's still going to get elected, and someone's still going to take that power and have exactly the same amount of power as if everyone voted. It's just like this idea that it's not that the product is this like a appointment, or the product is, it's not the process of like actually building community and coming together and actually like discussing stuff.
I think yes, it could do some good stuff in suburbia, and you'd have to be really careful about how your constitution comes together, and then how the assembly comes together. The next question is from Radical Edward 37, who says, what is your advice to someone who is wanting to get involved but still struggling with the anxiety of making that first jump?
I want to hit you with a anecdote, and this is not necessarily to like shame anyone or anything like that, but I've been on a training course with the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and I just want to kind of repeat what this person said, because one of the organizations that's helping with this training course, it's called Organizing for Power. It's not really, it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about, but just want to tell you kind of what happened. This woman called Jane McAlevey, I don't know like a lot of her politics, but she's very into trade union organizing, so she must be a little bit based at least. She's literally dying of terminal blood cancer and does not know how long she has to live. But she came into the first session of this training literally to tell us how excited she was that so many new people were coming into activism, and literally said to us, we can beat these bastards, we will beat these bastards. And a great way to sort of get yourself into the mood of what we're actually doing and what we want is to give yourself an affirmation every day. And I've been trying to do this the last few days, actually. I've not been so successful, but the affirmation is, I am deliberate and I am not afraid, right? And whatever anxiety that you may be having, in terms of, I don't know how people are going to accept me if I go to a particular org. I don't know if I'm going to have the courage to speak out. I don't know if I'm going to have this, that, and the other to deal with. But here's the thing. You will only find that stuff out if you go. And if we're going to take this affirmation from Jane McAlevey, which is, I am deliberate and I am not afraid, if you've been here on the internet and you've listened to Red Planet and you've listened to us talk about the revolution and all this stuff, we know that what we're doing is right and correct. And so you just need to be, deliberate and not afraid to do that. And I know that's very easy to say. It's very, very easy to say, like, be deliberate and not afraid, and know that you're going to organize to do the right thing. But, that's not going to work for everyone. You might have very, very serious anxiety, in which case being more practical and pragmatic about it without being rhetorical and trying to be inspiring. The actual activism that you might need to do is for yourself at the minute, possibly. Yeah. And that is still like radical activism, because you are trying to do mental health liberation. You're trying to liberate yourself from the horrors that capitalism has enforced on your life through trauma and that kind of stuff.
I really like the idea of daily affirmations. This is off topic, but I've been trying to do something similar, and I've talked about this with my community and my Discord a bit. Just the way that, again, off topic, but the way that women's looks are so heavily dissected and torn down, and there's a new product for a new problem that you didn't know you had every single day. It can be really jarring just trying to like live with your own face and your own self, like as a woman. It's like really traumatic living in this capitalist hellscape with like the amount that you are the massive industries that just exist just to create insecurities and then exploit them. And then the newest way that your hair is supposed to look, your eyebrows supposed to look, your skin's supposed to look, it changes too. So you can't even like fully, there's always a new thing. And so I've been trying to do, and this is a good reminder because I've been failing lately, but I'm trying to do, and I encourage all the femme listeners, femme audience members to try to tell yourself something positive about yourself every day. Like look in the mirror, say something nice about yourself. It is so radical to do this. Like it's supremely radical, and it's something that you might not feel like you deserve it. And maybe it feels really weird at first. Maybe you have a hard time coming up with something. Anything, just take anything and just tell yourself, just be kind to yourself and say something kind about yourself. And it actually does help.
I
So-
love that. Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to second that, but I am conscious of time. Do want to get to the other questions. I just really like what Kira said. You said you've been failing to do it, and that's not true. You succeed every day that you do it. You haven't failed when you don't. Okay.
Thanks, Soph.
Okay, Kale Gray says, what are the steps being taken to mitigate COVID at these assemblies? And sadly, the answer is, it depends on the assembly, doesn't it? You will have some COVID conscious ones. I want to quickly point out that May 15th, coming up in a couple of days, is Long COVID Awareness Day. My best friend since childhood has long COVID, and it has fucked their life really badly, and people need to be more aware and more conscious of long COVID and take it fucking seriously, because it's a nightmare. May 15th.
The Zoom Hui, the Zui is a good actual kind of example of things that people have been doing. I've seen a lot of people do it in instances when they could just meet up in person, but they've just done it online because whether it's because the venue that they have is because some places I've seen people switching to outdoor venues where it's like a lot more open air and stuff. But if you don't have a venue that is kind of suitable, if it's tight and cramped, or you're sharing the space with a lot of other people and things like that, it's not always ideal. So online is a good alternative if you're worried about that, or outside if weather permitting and you have a space and all that kind of stuff.
I would like to bring a very succinct and quick, because I know I'm conscious of time, just sort of observation that I've had with organizing with people IRL versus like leftist communities on the internet. And the reality of it is that IRL people are just not thinking about COVID, right? And so I think, and I'm not saying like, oh, it's pointless to try and do anything about it. I think, because here's how I've dealt with it, right? If someone in a meeting that I'm in starts coughing, I kind of stand up and go, not really comfortable being here. I'm just going to go. I think if people are ill, they shouldn't be here, kind of thing. You don't need to make like a big statement about it. You can either just like sort of, if you're feeling a bit anxious about it, just letting you know I'm just going to go. And then if people want to ask you like, why did you leave? It's like, well, I just don't think people should be coming to meetings when they're sick. It's really dangerous for like, for your comrades. Like, cause I think when people mention the COVID word, everyone starts to get like, they have this like massive denial dread about it. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. Like I had 9 months of fatigue and I was essentially completely fucked for, a long time because of COVID, and people really need to take it seriously. But I think the best way to do it is to try and cultivate in your org a culture of, if people are just sick, like whatever sickness that is. If you're sick, like if someone's saying, "Oh, I'm ill, so I don't know if I should come to the meeting," slam hard down on that, comrade. Like, yo, no, stay home. Are you being serious? Like, you need to rest. You need to stay well. You need to look after yourself and not infect other comrades. And they'll get it because everybody remembers that shit from COVID. They do get it when you say that stuff to them. So that's the kind of experience that I've had with that, and it does need to get better. Yeah, sorry, went on for a bit long.
I think it was a great answer. Next question.
Yeah. Cool. So question from Lorcan Nagel. Do you have any strategies to keep decision making in the assemblies and not a core group who are friends and gravitate to leadership positions and mixing socializing and activism? Ooh.
Well, okay.
No.
Yeah, so I mean, my instinctual answer is like a flippant one, and it's like, if anyone listening has those answers, like email based@redplanet, but this is a bit of why I was hammering home in my article, the sky is falling, about trans organizing. But like, if we identify ourselves as the activist faction, like, we need to make the assembly and empower other people to do the stuff. And I think that, like, if you're talking about decision making in the assembly, is like, yeah, like if you've done the assembly right, then you, the core group of friends, whatever, you're just making the assembly happen. And then if you, as your core group of friends, have an org you're going to form or whatever, like, you already are friends and you know that you can go do that. And maybe you can talk to other people who show up to the assemblies if you need more people there. But like, if you're doing it right, then you are facilitating others to speak in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just really tough. It's just a super common problem and super tough. But I think we got to encourage people to view the forming of an assembly as a worthy work in and of itself, because it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, one last question from Kel Gray. I got another question. What attitude do you think is a good one to have towards assemblies? Do you want it to be like a casual thing, or do you want it to be a bit like work or something else? Good one. I feel like it would be good to feel like it's kind of like a duty. Yeah, but like ideally it shouldn't feel like work. Like, I know a lot of people that say that it feels like, like it, obviously they feel like there's a duty there, but it also is like a really
What's
like
a duty?
energizing thing. Oh, like something that you kind of like feel like an obligation towards.
Okay.
Like,
Your duty.
yeah.
Like, hang on.
Duty. Sorry, your accent.
Yeah.
Hang on.
I confused my American brain.
You were saying about like obligation, but I think the idea of civic duty and civic pride is a really useful concept here, because I think that like duty is certainly an idea that people get if they feel a weight on them when they think about it, right? Like, you just said obligation, but it's like, if it's a duty because you are proud of the community you're in and want to make it better, like, that's the kind of duty you wanted. I think that's the feeling that I would like to cultivate. If I were making an assembly, I would love for everyone to show up, curious at first. Maybe they just want the free scran. Maybe they've heard someone they got a crush on is going or whatever. But over time, they're like, I fucking love this community, and when I show up, I feel like I'm making it better. Like, that's the feeling I think would be
Yeah. Like I was just going to say, like, a lot of people I know feel like coming away from these kind of things, they feel like quite energized, and that it's kind of like, like also kind of social and all this kind of thing. So I don't think it should be something to kind of, like, it shouldn't be like this bad obligation. Yeah, should be something from pride. Does anyone else have anything for that one?
I think I've given my answer.
Yeah,
Duty.
awesome. Well, so do we have homework for this week?
Yes, I would like. I hope I've been clear on this. I want people to come out of this episode prepared to start an assembly. So, like, if you're someone who's been thinking about starting an org for a while, start an assembly. That is the homework I'm setting on this one. I don't expect everyone to do it. I don't expect most people to do it. I would love to hear that someone's taken it seriously and has gone away to start an assembly, because like I really think this is shit that, you know, can help to change stuff. Bear in mind what I'm saying about assembly org, dissolution and reconstitution, right? Like I don't think this is all about just like it's going to solve it the one time around, right? Don't make a DSA, make something people come back to. But you know, think
My
about
grandfather was a DSA, so
A
please.
whole DSA, an entire
Hey,
one.
some
Please
of
be
my best
respectful.
friends
I'm
are
very offended
DSA.
when you
I'm sorry. But like,
I know I speak for many of my listeners too. Many of your listeners.
Fair
Okay,
enough.
sorry, go ahead.
if you love homework but don't don't feel in the position to do that or whatever, then the kind of fun exercise homework you could do is think about the tricky questions we've identified about forming like in making the constitution of an assembly in this episode, and try to answer those, ideally not on your own, ideally in conversation with somebody else.
Or just draw a nice picture.
And then put it right
A
up on
nice
the fridge.
poster for your assembly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put it on the fridge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Without politics.
Cool.
Well, that was a very solid show. Thank you so much for all the co-hosts for carrying that episode and teaching me a lot. And thank you for the chat for asking such great questions. We're going to wrap things up because we are a bit over time. But we're going to do a quick shout out to our Patreon. Make sure you head over to patreon.com/red_planet. We are a 100% viewer driven audience of listener viewer audience member driven show. Please consider becoming a patron. We really, really appreciate it. In the interest of time, we do need to wrap things up quite quickly. And I want to start out with asking Sophie. Sophie, where can we find you and how can we best support you?
As I said at the top of the show, I am really struggling with money at the moment. I will reiterate, just because I am really serious about this. Friends have been helping me buy groceries and afford HRT, and I've been really worried about losing my home. I've been experiencing like very serious financial hardship for a while. So if you can help me out, please do. I would really appreciate it. All my links are at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. I have a Patreon. On that Patreon, even for free, you can find the article I've been discussing today, The Sky is Falling, Panicking Will Not Save Us, Organizing Will. But if you give me some money, then you can access all of my writing that I'm doing at the moment in my hiatus before I come back to publishing videos on my YouTube channel, etc. You can also just send me money directly if you have a bit of money to spare, but not ongoing. That's linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars, all one word. But what about Tim for the Tim heads? I'm a Tim head and I want more Tim. Where can we find you?
For all the real Tim heads, you can find me on Twitch and YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or you can find me over on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. And if you're interested in tabletop RPGs, you can check out the one I've been working on, Dark RPG 2000, on Twitter. It's very cool and it's almost done. It's weird. I'm making a book, like physically a book, an object. All right. What about Mule? Where can we find more about a DJ Mule?
Thank you very much, Tim. You can go to linktree.ee/DJ Mule. My streams are basically like done for the time being. I'm not going to be doing politics streaming. I got very burnt out. You can read more about that on my Patreon. It's literally just patreon.com/DJ Mule. So I've got a job, so don't worry about like giving me money. I'm literally starting in a month. It's fine. If you need to support someone financially, go and support Sophie. No drama whatsoever about supporting me for the next however, really. But if you do have enough money to support both me and Sophie, you can go to patreon.com/DJ Mule. I would advise everybody who has been supporting me via PayPal on my streams to go there and do that instead now. I'm going to be doing some more YouTube videos and shit like that. I'll be able to concentrate on that a lot more now. It's going to be better. So yeah, there you go. Kira, what about you?
Me? Oh, thank you. That's a great question. Well, you can go to my link tree at linktr.ee/KiraChats. All my links are there. I'm not really active on much right now, but the only place I really am active is my Discord. So just go straight there, discord.gg/KiraChats. I will let y'all know when it's ready to be announced, my new website, so you can click on it and give me clickable clicks and metrics and all that fun stuff. We'll talk about that in the future. But right now, I encourage everyone to head over to patreon.com/Sophie for Mars. Please support my friend Sophie.
And one final thing before we go, because even though we didn't mention the tiers of the Patreon, I think we should thank our sickos. So thank you to JBP, Queen Pib, Cassie Tastrophe, and Risk Inverse. Thank you for supporting us as much as you do. And everybody else, thank you so much for watching our wonderful show.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next week.
Bye.
Ooh.
Wait, where am I looking?